Hi, hello everyone. I'm Giri Prakash from the Federal. The union budget was announced in the morning today, and we decided to have this panel discussion. Let me introduce the guest today. Mr. Sandeep Agrawal is the director and co-founder of TeamLease RegTech, and we have Mr. T.R. Vivek, who is the editor and CEO of The Plate, and we have Ridhima Mehta, who is a manager with a consultancy firm. Pallavi Singhal is partner PricewaterhouseCoopers, and we'll also be joined by Harish Menon, who is a financial planner with the House of Alpha. Thank you very much for taking time off during this busy schedule to join me. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Giri. Thank you for this opportunity.
Hi. Yeah, hi. So let me start off with a quote which I read recently in a book, and then I will sort of hand it over to you with a few questions. I was reading a book by the former chief economic advisor, Kaushik Basu, who said that the best politicians are the ones who are willing to lose elections. They are the ones who can bring about the deepest and best changes. So I'm going to ask all of you whether the finance minister's speech today, did it tend towards populist, or was it focused more on economic growth? And Mr. Agrawal, let me start off with you. If you can highlight some of the major features of the budget and your views on that.
Sure, Giri. Thank you. I feel that this government has always been focusing on economic growth. And if you look at several years' budgets, it has always taken initiatives or reforms which will help, which are growth-oriented initiatives. In spite of several challenges in the last couple of years, the fiscal support has always been on. They have been able to introduce reforms which can help sustain in these challenges. I mean, significant investments and public spending on infrastructure, which has kept the momentum on for growth in private sector investments, employment, foreign employment. So, I mean, all of these initiatives have helped us sustain the 3 or 4 challenges which global economies have seen in the last 3 years. I mean, if you look at 2020, when it started with COVID, it was problem statement for everybody across the globe. I mean, although we sustained the second and the third wave, we came out very faster. But again, the Russian-Ukraine war created another issue with the significant increase in commodity prices, which led to significant inflations. But all of this, India also had faced issues around it, but the foundations that they have made in several years in the past actually helped us sustain a growth rate of around 6% or inflation below 5% or close to 5%. So I think the overall view of the government from a future-oriented perspective has always been there. And this budget also, we have seen the similar approach with significant increments in the investments or the public investments, 33% jump, increasing it to 10 lakh crores with a significant view. And focus on multiple. So they had around 7 focus areas, which Madam Sitaraman talked about. I think infrastructure development was one of the important area where they've spent and focused a significant value, either in terms of urban development, infrastructure funds, or a lot of initiatives around different perspectives have been taken by them. But physical infrastructure, or be it digital infrastructure, they have been over the years able to take a right set of reforms which help them sustain these activities. I mean, GST, if you look at it, was a very difficult call that they've taken. Several years had taken, or 17 years it took government to actually implement GST. It took 1,000 plus notifications or amendments to actually make it sustainable over 5 years. But I think today that has actually helped the government significantly manage their capital outflow deficit with 13.4 lakh crores collections in 9 months, which has also grown over 25% year on year. So I think all of these initiatives helped the government. I would continue to believe that the similar initiatives on growth oriented activities which help corporates and government grow or support them on a growth path.
Okay. Let me get to Vivek, and if your initial thoughts on the union budget today, Vivek.
Giri Prakash, I've long felt that budgets are not as important in India as we make them out to be. It becomes a big TRP hunt for business television channels and a means for newspapers to sell additional copies and generate more advertising revenue, as you and I well know, having worked in business newspapers especially. What a budget ought to be seen as is a weather vane for policy and political directions a government wants to signal. In that sense, I find this to be a rather sensible budget without any sort of big bang initiatives. I wouldn't call it incrementalism, but there seems to be a bigger focus on execution and fixing structural issues. In any exercise of this sort, I would look at five major points, five major themes. One is the reliability and predictability of policy. The second one is integrity of numbers. Are the numbers stacking up? In the past, especially during UPA2, there was this criticism of budgets being not financially sound. There seemed to be a lot of discrepancy in what is coming in and what the government claims were. So the finance minister in UPA2 received a lot of flack. The third, I would think the unleashing of animal spirits. Both from a demand and consumption point of view. Are you making doing business easier? Are you unleashing the animal spirits of the corporate sectors to be inventive, innovative, and risk-taking? Are you abetting demand? Are you creating enough incentives for consumers to go out and spend, to be able to create confidence in the future outlook when consumers don't feel threatened, taxpayers don't feel threatened about their future? So these would be some of the key parameters that I would evaluate this on, and I think this budget does fairly well on most of these counts.
Yeah, one thing we can see is that the markets have been very positive about this budget and have steadily actually sustained the kind of growth there.
Yeah,
and I would like to ask
one more point I would add is that whether a budget is empathetic towards certain contextual pain points in the economy, and what does it do to address those?
Okay. Ms. Singhal, your views on it. There seems to be a lot of positivity around this budget, and I would like to know your views on that.
So thank you. And while I do echo what I just heard, but my take on the key theme that emanated for me from the budget is slightly different. As we all know, this is the last full-fledged budget of the NDA 2.0. Next year, it will be a vote on account. And this year, it was met with real no competition. And while if you see the fine print, there are more than 120 changes, but those are more procedural, semantic, or clarificatory changes. The themes seem to be very simplistic. Firstly, on a broader note, I feel that they have adopted the entire ESG route in this budget. Most of the big ticket announcements that have come in,
that's interesting.
Environment, social, or governance aspects. So you take the green hydrogen mission, the PM Pranam scheme, the Panchamrit goal that they set out, or the measures that they're doing to address unemployment, uplifting MSMEs. ESG has really been addressed. There's a lot of focus on governance also. They brought in a unified filing process, which will be like a one-stop window for filing all operation. PAN being a common identifier, while we still do have Aadhaar, but for businesses, PAN being a common identifier, focusing on developing applications using 5G, like we hear that promoting innovations also is important in the field of new age tech. So I think it's clearly an ESG focused budget. If you ask me in context of specifically tax, and just because this is my domain, I'll take the liberty of holding out on this. They have brought in a lot of measures or procedural or semantic changes to address simplicity and rationalization. You talk about specific sections dealing with enabling various revenue authorities to get more time to actually process whether it's tax returns or revenue audits, or you talk about tweaking of customs rate to incentivize domestic manufacturing and resolve inverted duty issues. Personal front, again, plethora of changes right from thresholds to slab rates to rationalizing surcharge even for the high income individuals. I think all in it. So basically they have chalked out their journey, like we heard Nirmala Sitharaman say during this Amrit Kal, both with a balance of fiscal prudence and I think a lot of ease. So we also did hear budget should really not be big bang. The very test of a good economy or an economy which is more developed is that the budget should not be big bang. It should just be a procedure to set out what the fiscal front is. And that's what is pretty much done.
I completely agree with you on that. And the kind of central theme that you talked about when it came to ESG, and the budget should actually be not a big bang, except the 91, of course, 1991, of course, which sort of was the trendsetter for all the future budgets. Ridhima, I would like to know your views on it. And one thing that I've we've been getting a lot of quotes, and people have been talking about the fact that there is a bit for everyone around. And do you agree with that? How do you look at this budget?
Yeah, thanks, Giri, for this opportunity first. And I think mostly everything is being covered in the viewpoints right now. And what I feel, just to add from a perspective that, they have been continuing on the Atmanirbhar Bharat thing. So, this has been continuing for past 3-4 years, and they've been really focusing on the domestic manufacturing. And this year also, they have really focused on that only and streamlining the custom duties on certain products, especially the mobile phone and all these domestic products, which they want the domestic manufacturing should be there. And there was a point where they highlighted they want more of exports also to happen. And they have seen in the food products also, they want more of the exports to happen. And last year they could feel that, agriculturists were able to really earn good margin profits, so they want to continue those things. So the country's avenue is towards rationalizing things, easing of the compliances, and they want structurized things, and of course like more of domestic manufacturing. And they have been continuing through a lot of PLI schemes also in the past, and I think that has been continued. And this year also the main focus was this only.
I do agree with you. Mr. Agarwal, looking at the kind of domain expertise that you have, would you like to highlight the 4 major issues that you feel is the fulcrum of this budget related to your domain expertise?
So, since I come from the RegTech domain, I think there are a couple of areas which government have been working on for several years. I think one thing they have been talking about is ease of doing business, specifically on rationalization of compliances and decriminalization of compliances. So I think Madam mentioned about a reduction of around 39,000 compliances over several years.
Yeah, that's true.
She also mentioned about decriminalizing around 3,400 plus legislations. Right. There's one more thing that they have been working on. We recently looked at Jan Vishwas bill, which a draft came across in December 2022. So I think these are one activity that the government has been working on is helping corporates to actually stay focused on business so that the worry on managing their compliances can be reduced to some extent. Now, additional activity which they have been working on is building on transparencies. And for that, they have been adopting technology. So technology, although I won't say a lot of ministries have adopted technology to help that transparency, but I think one classic example was GST. or the finance ministry, the technology that they've adopted over years, which have brought in a faceless assessments, or you can talk about GST, where everything is online and transparent, which actually also helped a reduction of litigation between corporates with respect to manipulations on non-payment of duty. So I think this one area around EODB with rationalization and decriminalization is one main theme that PM office, I would say, has been working significantly on, since we have been part of certain committees at their end. Right. So we have been helping them on decriminalization committee. We papered a bill on, not a bill, sorry, we had authored a paper on jailed for doing business. I think based on that paper, we got a chance to actually work with several ministries at a PMO office, where we highlighted the current provisions that the criminal provisions that the Act has, which broadly has no relevance in the current date. I mean, all of these legislatures have been created decades ago, and there's barely any improvements or amendments which has actually thought through with respect to the penal provisions. So I think that is one area that government has taken it very seriously. They have worked and they have made it mandatory for secretaries to actually reduce compliances. One more thing that Madam mentioned today on the financial sector. So she has mentioned that she'll request the regulatory authority to actually revisit the entire regulation for financial sector and see what can be done to ease the compliances for financial sector. So I think that one theme of ease of doing business, and I mean, we have seen improvements in UDB ranking for states and India as well. So I think there are a couple of activities that they have been doing for several years around this theme. MSMEs, if you look at it, I think I'm not sure how it will be implemented, but one thing they were talking about earlier it was that you need to get paid within 45 days, right? I think I heard today Madam mentioning that for MSMEs, the corporates who have spent or the expenditure will be allowed only if paid or only on payment. So it would be a practical difficulty for corporates to track it, because the current accounting system is on approvals. But I think this could be one important support system, so that you're helping and supporting small businesses to sustain. Right. I have always been looking at practical aspects for small businesses. So if you look at GST, I have been talking and discussing with a lot of small businesses where GST is basically indirect tax, right? So you have to collect and pay, but unfortunately, in spite of MSMEs laws, you do not get paid within 45 days. So you end up paying in the next month, and probably your DSO is around 90 days to 120 days. You end up paying the GST liability from your own pockets for 2-3 months. So that's where you're anyways a small business, you're finding it very difficult for credit availments, and tax liabilities is actually a significant burden. So, I mean, over a period of time, government has been doing, and I'm sure a lot of suggestions have been given to government to actually help ease of doing businesses in different perspectives. I think that is one theme that will take a longer route, but we have seen several initiatives taken by government actually on this thing.
You talked about this, you being part of the committee. Does this budget address those issues when it comes to ease of doing business and reducing several of these compliances? Some of them are extremely silly and date back to the independence, the first few years of independence. Has the government done something on that? Can you point out a few of them?
So I think initiatives have been done. Madam talked about around 39,000 compliances getting reduced. I think we still think there is a lot of room for improvisations, right? I mean, I'll take certain examples. Let a small company with one corporate office, one manufacturing location still have to do at least 2 to 3 compliance a day.
Correct.
In totality, right? So I'm sure there is a lot of room. I mean, if you talk about MSMEs also, I mean, there is a possibility that you significantly reduce compliance for MSME so that entrepreneurship can be actually boosted, right? So they have been looking at reducing compliances, but I'm sure we are far from where we need to be. There are a lot of work that has to be done over the years for government. I mean, digitization. I mean, digital administration is one thing where even if you have reduced compliances, but I don't think so today government has the right set of capabilities to actually administer them properly. Right? We have been looking at labor codes for several years now, which for certain reasons have not been implemented. But I still have, thoughts that even if the labor codes gets implemented, how will government actually monitor them? Or so if you don't have a digital platform to monitor all of this, it's basically audits. And in this world, with the growing number of companies across India, physical audits is not the right way of doing it. Right. So per se, over the years, I think reduction in compliance in one way or one perspective that the government has to look at, but digitization or adoption of digital platforms to actually manage the entire administration of taxation compliances is another important perspective that government has to think through. It is a long journey. I mean, we are looking at a 10-year or a decade's view, because a lot of compliance in India is not only central, every state manages it. I mean, labor compliances or environment compliances.
It's a federal setup as well.
Correct. So, I mean, bringing every state onto a single platform, and ensuring that everybody has, I mean, today with labor, every state has a different format for returns and registers.
Right.
If I am a company, if I have setups across India, I am basically struggling to manage compliances in each state. So that's where government has to ensure. I mean, there was one discussion or one mention about single platform for exchanging information with different, one single platform, unified platform that has been mentioned to actually exchange information. So I mean, it has to be seen how it is being implemented, what benefits it's bringing in, what kind of reduction of exchange of information between different departments. So I'm sure it's a long journey. It will take a lot of time for government, but I think that is one important area of rationalization and decriminalization or digitization, where if government is able to achieve it in next 5-10 years, I'm sure that's an important achievement and help to corporate that.
Yeah, I mean, real major reforms are needed, and I assume all the states should come together to see that these kind of compliances are reduced and better ones are there in place. Vivek, you've been a journalist for more than 2 decades, and you've launched your own startup. And what I would like to know from you is two things. One is, apart from the fact that you launched a startup on as far as agriculture is concerned, so and the startup itself, how reasonable has the government been in terms of being very when it comes to giving SOPs to the startups and making things much easier for startups? There are quite a few announcements in this budget as well for startups, plus the big one, the agriculture sector.
Right. Okay, I'll take the question in two parts. I'll give you my personal experience as well. I incorporated a company last year, and the process of starting up itself is fairly smooth and straightforward. But it is what comes thereafter. The burden of ongoing compliance can be a headache, and for first generation entrepreneurs like me, you will have to spend a significant amount of money on professional advice for ongoing compliance. That apart, if you come to agriculture, I was left a little cold with the measures that the finance minister spoke with regards to agriculture. Of course, the target for agricultural credit is up slightly from what it was 18,000 crore to 20,000 crore this year. But the emphasis seems to be on creating an ecosystem of innovation around agriculture. India for a long time has been caught up in this productivity paradigm, where our focus has been to increase production of various commodities. I think now we have crossed that hump, and now our focus ought to be to increase productivity, to get more yield per acre, with lesser resources, with a greener footprint. And the emphasis, I think finance minister recognizes that, instead of focusing on the production paradigm, she's trying to create this ecosystem of entrepreneurship to be able to, for youngsters to be able to solve, the pressing problems of market access for the farmers. The real economic multiplier in agriculture comes when value addition happens as close to the farm gate as possible. Right now, our farmers are mere suppliers to urban consumers, where their contribution in the value chain to value addition is very minimal. I'll give you an example, a very good story that India can learn from is, I went on a week-long trip to Nashik this week. And Nashik is a very prosperous agricultural region compared to other districts in this country, and it is horticulture predominant. It is the largest producers of grapes and onion.
Right. Yeah.
So
the wine industry
has a very clear export focus. Where grapes are in high demand across the world, and farmers in Nashik, through harnessing the power of collectivization, have managed to crack the European market, which is often considered the most difficult market for Indian agricultural products, because of their very stringent residue limits, etc. But that's what happens, if farmers are able to think big and beyond the box, out of the box, that is the kind of potential Indian agriculture has. And I think the budget kind of rightly understands the importance of ecosystem around agriculture, and our ability to solve problems and to be able to create more value in and around the farm gate. And to that extent, I think the measures announced in this budget, in terms of boosting entrepreneurship around agriculture, are very welcome. In fact, in the Startup India scheme, already agriculture is a big focus. If you look at the incubators and their focus areas, agri and agri-tech dominates, compared to any other sector. So I think I see this as a continuation of that focus of creating smart solutions to make farmers prosperous.
Okay, this is very interesting, and we'll come back to you more as we dig deeper into the union budget as far as the agriculture sector is concerned. Ms. Singhal, I would like to know, we haven't really dug deeper into the union budget, but then I would like to know, as far as indirect taxes are concerned, there's a bit of here and there, but your entire perspective on it. And do you think, I don't see any, there are schemes which actually go past 2024 as well. So how do you look at it? And I would like also want you to map the journey of the current government from 2014 till now, as far as indirect taxes are concerned.
So sorry, you'll have to pardon me while I definitely can give my broad views on indirect taxes, but I am a corporate tax expert, and therefore let me just provide.
Yeah, you please go ahead with that as well. Sure.
Yeah. So I feel it's very, the continuity is maintained, like Ridhima also did mention, while it's maintained on multiple counts, not necessarily taxes. You see the broad two things where they maintained continuity is the Make in India, and thereby all the consequential GST as well as corporate tax amendments to focus or incentivize domestic manufacturing, whether that is betting on startups and providing a lot of impetus by way of loss carry forward or extending the eligibility for a startup to begin functioning by 1 year. Definitely that is an incentive. Secondly, in context of customs duty, also all the rationalization that they've done, primarily with the ultimate objective of tweaking it and building it into, again, focus on the domestic market, or bringing in non-residents on par in context of sale of shares, where there is a holding in Indian companies on valuation count, thereby bringing in parity between residents and non-resident taxation. Again,
that is true,
domestic investment. So I think that is one common theme. We can always have our critical views on what they could have done better to promote the Make in India, but definitely it is continuing to be a focus. The second is the digital economy. And we know while you have a lot of these people who have now come in more as intermediaries, whereby earlier the only financial institution which supported any form of barter or trade used to be only the banks. There is still a long way to go on digitization. patient because we still have not got our handle around how we go about taxing them, ensuring that India doesn't lose out on their revenue, as well as educating and factoring the fact that we have a lot of public still based out of the rural areas, and their proximity and access to such a digital economy is not as great as it should be. It's definitely getting better. But if you see in their first stint as well as the second stint, this is definitely an underlying continuous theme. They've always spoken about simplicity and rationalization. While I concede that there are many, many procedural and clarificatory amendments, but I will also go on record to say it's definitely taken, it's much too little and done a little too late during the day. You had committed and promised during your first regime to go down to a low tax rate of 15%. That is limited to new manufacturing companies, and now they've given it just for cooperative societies. How many new setups are there? How many cooperative societies still operate in the country? So we still that way have not bridged that effective tax rate coming down to what our neighbors are. Forget the rest of the world, but you take Singapore, you take Hong Kong, you take Australia, they're all having tax rates of as low as 17%, while we're still grappling with a 22% and 30%. On personal taxes, of course, they've done a lot. I think one pinch there was that high net worth individuals also have been provided a lot of relief.
That's true.
Yeah, they've always been complaining, saying it's always us who cough up more while we earn this through the normal means, just as anybody else. We work as hard. So I think that way, to this extent, it's a populist budget where through rebates and incentives, they've catered to the lower middle class and middle class equally to the HNIs. So I think that way it's not a flip-flop, but a continuous progress on what used to be their objective and agenda. We can always grade them on a scale of 1 to 10 on success, but the intent is definitely there.
One thing about the corporate sector has been about the lending rates. And how do you look at it? How do you look at this budget? Do you think that is one of the things that they have always talked about, and that's been one of the big pain points as well? Do you think that has been addressed, and do you think that the government has enough time to do that? This has not been...
I don't think it's still as competitive. I mean, you take just simple case in point being Japan. Still borrowing from Japan is more cheap as compared to India. And that also, if I take a tax break on the lending rates, you get a better deal when you invoke treaty between, say, India and Japan. So definitely there is more room. As you rightly said, they've addressed it in some spaces, like, for example, the MSME sector. But I definitely think there's a lot more to be done on this.
As far as the corporate tax is concerned, was there some kind of the things that you really wanted, say 4 or 5 of them, which the government struggles to actually implement, and what could be the reasons for that? Because there is always a bit of the government is trying to be very populist, and at the same time has to be reasonable. Because see, if you look at this current government, the current budget, they expect buoyancy from the private sector. Right. They expect that the private sector should be the one who should be increasing capex. They expect the private sector to actually go ahead and maintain the momentum and then increase growth. So a lot of it they expected from the private sector, saying that this is all we can do as far as the government is concerned. So how do you look at this kind of an argument?
See, the asks would be simple. Like anybody, the corporates also one they wanted were lower tax rates. Obviously, that has not been done. They just checked the box to say because it was an election propaganda that they will reduce the rate to 15%. They did it for only one specific class or group of companies, but still the corporate tax rate continues to be high, like we discussed. Then again, simplification, while they keep emphasizing on it, but if you break down the fine print, there is only that much that is there in simplification. A few withholding tax or TDS provisions have been simplified, or the methodology of making appeals. And while they have simplified a lot of time limits for revenue audits, that is like a shot in the arm. You can always use it otherwise. When you have more time, you can make more big ticket adjustments. So I think there is a gap between what is promised by the bureaucrats and what we see happening at ground level. Until that is not, it's like actions speak louder than words. We can hear what we like during the presentation of the budget or in the fine print. But if the common man today goes to bed thinking nothing has changed for him, and he gets up tomorrow and he goes about his normal duty, or corporates feel that they'll still get harassed by officers where we are in quarter 4, you'll have tax officers coming, calling for tax payments, refunds continue to be blocked. And if you see detailing of fine prints, these are the challenges which have been brought in. That the government has been empowered to say hold back refunds. That will impact the cash in the economy also significantly, and it will not solve the agenda to widen the tax net. So I think broadly, a lot of these asks or rationalization of gains taxes, the long-term, short-term capital gain, that has been left untouched. So I think these were some of the asks that, so these were some of the asks that corporates did have, where they had an opportunity to do it now because they have a majority, but they chose not to do it. And you did ask what could be the possible reasons. I think it's twofold. Obviously, they want to address the fiscal deficit, and in many ways, rightly so. And they're not able to come up with other ways and means to offset any leeway that they give here. Secondly, they have repeatedly held up. They are not going to give any profit-based incentives. They've always believed and stated that they will give only investment-based incentives. So I think that's also one where they want to, whatever is their agenda, if it's ESG, they will focus on investments in ESG, and they've withdrawn any SOPs on profits.
Which is true. That's quite interesting that you say, because of the fact that as far as the corporate sector is concerned, apart from the fact that they expect the private sector to play a larger role now than ever before, one thing I have realized that over the years, I'm not going to say, I'm not saying it's pro-poor, it's a poorer budget in terms of when you compare it with the GDP. There's less and less money out there, and they expect the private sector to actually drive the growth. And that has been the theme for a very long time. Right. Correct. So, Ridhima, I would like to know, in your area of expertise, can you draw, say, 5 major measures? Do you think is something that this budget actually highlights in your area of expertise, and what is the way forward for the government, and what they should look with this kind of budget going into the election year?
Yeah. So talking about indirect taxes, basically, so, like you were asking from 2014 to right now. So earlier, 2017, GST came in. So when the GST came in, it was one tax perspective. And then the agenda behind GST was rationalization of the taxes and the rates, and ease of compliances and everything. So government is focusing on it and working on it, and of course, being the Atmanirbhar Bharat also aligned to these GST forums as well. So now they have brought in a lot of PLI schemes, which I mentioned earlier, along with the state incentives and all these schemes as well. So and in terms of ease of compliances in the processes, so for even, they have brought in utilities for the small taxpayers also. So what they've done is, they have made a lot of use of technology, and if the smaller companies or MSMEs, they cannot afford the tools and all. So they have brought in some automated tax solutions for them also, which is available on the portal as well. So, they are helping these, and they are trying to rationalize lot of compliances from that perspective also, and the data linkage is also there. Like right now, these whatever the data we are giving, maybe there we might have to do a reconciliation from an income tax perspective as well. So they are actually somehow syncing the data as well, so that everyone can use the data, and the the output can be created. Then of course that e-invoicing was one of the greatest amendment which was came in, and now after the e-invoice and everything, it's easier and there are less of challenges. And especially earlier, people used to do fake invoicing as well. So these are the measures which have been curbed with these processes which have been coming over a period of time. And for refunds processing also, earlier we had all the refunds processing which was we had to go to the departments. Now everything has become online. So the transparency has been coming over, and it is helping us to reduce the litigations per se and the timelines as well. But still, what we feel is, there are a lot of audits and compliances which are under GST, and right now they are not streamlined. They are not that in the e version mode. So we want at least those audits and everything should also be e mode, because sometimes the officers are not available and everything. So there are a lot of difficulties which the companies usually face. So we want these compliances to be reduced, more streamlined things to be happen. Of course, the Atmanirbhar Bharat agenda should go on, and the way it has been. But there are certain practical challenges also, because sometimes they are reducing, but maybe the technology is not there right now. So we have to brought in other factors also to consider it to make it a more success.
Sure, thanks, Ridhima. Mr. Agrawal, I would like to know, do you think it's a bits and pieces kind of budget, and do you think the government is quite confident of going into the election year with this kind of a budget? I just want an overall picture. I mean, I'm taking away the politics of it, but basically on the
I would so not being political. So I don't think so. These budgets has anything to do with next year's election. I mean, that's my personal opinion. I mean,
which is quite surprising, right? One expected it to be very populist.
Correct. I mean, there is one way of looking at it where, since it's the last year and you have to face an election next year, I think you will try to actually do a lot of things to impress a lot of people there. But I think the activities that they've spent on the allocations of funds that they've worked on is basically from a long-term perspective. I mean, a lot of activities where there is spending defined. I mean, be it agriculture, fisheries, health, education, this has nothing to do with next year's election. I mean, from my perspective, right? I mean, you're talking about reaching the last mile. You're talking about helping 3.5 lakh students at a tribal area, which has nothing to do with the next year's election. So these are a lot of allocations, which is inclusivity from a growth perspective. You're trying to do a lot of things for a lot of people, may not be sufficient for everybody, right? Specifically because you have a capital account deficit. With the deficit, you have, I mean, I have 100 rupees, I can spend only 100 rupees, but I'm now spending more than 100 rupees with certain funding arrangements. So, I mean, I'll have to be very frugal with respect to how I allocate funds. And as the government or as the government, I'm required to manage the entire nation. So I think elections definitely is one thought at the back of the mind. But I think what I have seen their budgets for several years, I think they have tried and laid foundation for future. A lot of activities that they have been doing is actually helping from a long-term perspective. You may not see immediate results, but a lot of activities that they have been doing can be seen from a long-term views. I mean, GST, I said earlier also, was a difficult and a challenge. But I think now as a country, we have seen the benefits of it. And it is helping manage their entire overall deficit as well. So, I mean, from my personal perspective, I think they're doing the right steps gradually, one by one, with the limited or resources that they have in hand. Unfortunately, with the global uncertainties, a lot of activities that they have done with thought that it will start materializing, nothing could happen actually for the last couple of years. But I think all those things actually helped us sustain all of these uncertainties. And I'm hoping that with the continued investment in the rights, areas, probably next 5 years would be much better from a country perspective.
Okay. Vivek, your thoughts. I want completely on agriculture now. You're an expert and you have written a lot about it.
Okay. No, on a lighter note, the finance minister listed out 7 themes of this budget as Saptarishi. I hope the details in the annexures don't make this a great bear or a big dipper budget, as the constellation name in English goes. With agriculture, again, to your question about the big political message here, I think it would be a fundamental misreading of this government and Mr. Modi if you were looking for populism of the kind, of your imagination with this budget. I don't think the government does populism that way. I think this government, unlike any other, is permanently on election mode. So if you look at the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana and the number of people covered under the free grain scheme, I think that number is mind-boggling. And the finance minister made it a point to list out the number of beneficiaries and the schemes over the last, especially during the second Modi government, that it has implemented. So I think populism or what the government calls as the Labharti schemes are an ongoing thing. So you don't look at it as a piecemeal event. The pre-budget Big Bang announcement, which is why I call this a sensible budget. Although nonsense can be injected into financial planning at any point during the year. Fingers crossed that does not happen. On the agriculture front, one of my big disappointments is that, this being the United Nations declared Year of Millets, we did not receive anything more than tokenism on the millets front from the finance minister. There was a nomenclatural upgrade for millets. Millets were earlier commonly known as coarse grains. Then they became nutri cereals, and now the finance minister has come up with a name called Shri Anna. Shri Anna. So I think
quite a few varieties there.
I think that's a nice inversion. All your South Indian viewers would know that they're called Siridhanyams, small grains. So I think from Siri to Sri Anna, seems to be a nice, clever inversion of the status of millets. But beyond that, the Indian Institute of Millet Research in Hyderabad sharing best practices globally. I think that's something that an organization like ICRISAT has already been doing for several years. I think what I would have expected is some more incentives or directions for state governments to bring millets into PTS, or some government announcement about making the footprint of millet in a lot of government schemes bigger. That is something I would have expected. But again, the catch is that the production of millets in India is already tiny. It's about 16 to 17 million tons. And there is only so much you can do with that quantum of grain. I would have expected more than just lip service and a clever marketing slogan around millets. That would be my sort of regret about it.
Okay. Thanks, Vivek. We have a new guest joining, Mr. Harish Menon. You are a financial analyst, and looking at this budget, what would you tell your clients? What to do, how to go about it?
Sure. Good afternoon to all your viewers. I run a wealth advisory firm, so I'm more a macro guy. I've been an economist. I was actually expecting this to be a pre-budget kind of a pre-election kind of a budget.
Pre-election,
But a lot of things have surprised me, to be honest. The most important takeaway for me is an extremely increased emphasis on capital allocation. So while earlier you were discussing about how a lot has been left to the private sector, I would actually disagree on that front, because this is one of the highest allocations I've seen to some of the capex projects that government has emphasized on, which is a very big surprise, because I kind of think that they're very confident about coming back to power. I don't know. I'm just reading that from a lot of their...
Actually, there are some schemes which spill over to from 2024. So
so I think they're probably... So I think they're political strategies are telling them that don't worry about next year, think a little long term. And I've never seen a last 2 years running into election going so high on capex. 33% increase, almost 13 lakh crores given to capex is a very high number. So that was a very interesting and important figure for me, because it kind of tells me that the government is still focused on the long term. Because if you look at the global backdrop from which we are coming, you have a global turmoil in many, many ways. And yet out of all of this, India has been kind of an oasis in terms of economic growth, in terms of how companies are performing, in terms of the startup ecosystem getting developed, in terms of benefiting from China plus one that is happening post-COVID. So I think there was a need for us to increase our capacity and also to increase our domestic consumption, which is again the emphasis of the government. So I was surprised to see that they have actually given some tax stops. They have increased the basic exemption limit effectively through a rebate that they have given. So up to 7 lakhs, if someone is earning up to 7 lakhs, technically you're not paying any income. Interestingly, they've also given some benefits on the surcharge for the highest tax slab, which is again a very big surprise, because one would imagine that you would tax the richer section
it doesn't
probably
get taxed,
higher.
right? You're right.
But I think they're probably giving a signal that we would want you to keep earning more and declaring more income. Again, the word is declaring, because a lot of business people around me, and I can say that for many of my clients as well, they have been a little unhappy with the super rich tax, so to say, the 43%, 42.7%. And some of them actually have been looking for ways to shift their business to, let's say, Dubai, for example, and do a lot of activities from there. So this will kind of be a little beneficial for that.
Let me interrupt you a bit.
Sure.
Vivek wants to leave. Ridhima also had some other things to do. So thank you, Vivek. Thanks for taking time off to be part of this panel discussion.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Please continue, Mr. Menon.
Right. I would just like to bring in a couple of aspects for the benefit of your viewers, because we were talking about the super rich high income bracket being given some SOPs. There are some very interesting provisions in the fine print which makes it clear that they are actually charging the super rich in multiple other ways. For example, any form of money back insurance policy where you're paying a premium of more than 5 lakh rupees per annum. Earlier, it was only applicable to ULIP. Now, any insurance policy where you're paying more than 5 lakhs per annum premium will actually get taxed when you get the money back. Unless, of course, if the insured is dead. These are high value insurance figures we are talking about.
Yes. Yeah, 5 lakhs premium is quite high. Yeah.
So if assume I have a money back where I was supposed to get 15 crore rupees, for example, of 30 years. It was completely tax free under the exempt mechanism. Now they're saying I'll tax that. So they're kind of saying, okay, I've given you a little bit of a reduction in surcharge. And to be honest, that surcharge will also increase, saying that we need it for the time being. So they're kind of delivering on that promise. Second is there is something called market linked debentures. If you know about financial instruments, it was gaining popularity among the HNI class. They were investing heavily in these Nifty linked debentures and products like that. My domain essentially to look at financial markets. Earlier, there was a little bit of a tax arbitrage there where all the gains were taxed at long-term capital gain. Now they've actually clubbed it and saying, okay, now I will tax it at short-term capital gain, which is your highest tax slab. So there are cases, again, if you read the fine print, you are not given any capital gain tax exemption for any gains about 10 crores on sale of house. Because what they're saying is that a lot of super HNIs were reinvesting money in luxurious houses to claim tax benefit. They have clubbed that. So they're trying to say, okay, I'll take away all these SOPs you're getting, but obviously overall I'll tax you separately in some other way. I think they're also gung-ho about the GST collection. So if you look at the numbers, again, as I said, I'm more a financial markets guy. They're estimating the GDP, the nominal GDP next year to grow at 10.5%, which I think is very realistic. Usually they assume 14%, 15%, but now they're assuming 10.5. They're assuming the direct tax collection to be again 10.5% only, both corporate as well as personal income tax, which I think again is realistic. And they're estimating the GST collection to be 12%. So I think they're kind of betting on the GST collection to be robust to take care of the fiscal prudence, because they've actually again not given a shock on that front also. Their borrowing program is not out of control. They've actually said that we will go below 5% on the fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP. So they've been able to balance it out. So I was just going through the numbers to see where are they getting the money from, because they're spending more, definitely. And they've also given some tax rebate. So where are they getting the money from? So I did some mathematics on the MLDs and the capital gains on those insurance part, etc. I think they're getting money from there, and GST they're estimating to be high. And if you look at all of this, the net result is that they've been able to kind of balance the markets with the infra requirement that you have. That's why if you look at bond market also, the yields have actually dropped today post the budget. So they're quite happy with the fiscal deficit figure. So overall, it surprised me because I was not expecting so many actual changes to be done. I thought this would be more of a lot of rhetorics and a lot of gyan, but actually there are some changes that have been made. So obviously I've not gone through all the fine print, but I'll do that over the next couple of days. But I'm not assuming any more surprises.
Okay, thanks, Simran. Single, before I finally wind up, I wanted to know your thoughts on two important issues. One is the fact that do you really think that a whole lot of these things that the union budget tackled this time should have been done much earlier, so that there would have been far more leeway for the government to do much more? That's one part of it. And I am going to ask this question to each one of you, a very popular kind of thing when it comes to rating this budget.
So the simple answer, and like I elaborated on which context I'm basing my response, is that definitely they've done it, which is commendable, but they've done it far too late. They did have a majority right from start, and we're really close to their second term. So obviously it should have been done earlier. I'm sure they have their own compulsions and reasons, but of course it's still welcome that they've rationalized, simplified, brought down whatever rates that they could. At least we are more competitive in the global landscape. And like we did hear Harish say, it was a very fine balancing act that they had to do, given what is the geopolitical sentiment around us. And in that, for us to not only emerge successful, battle the pandemic and post-recovery as well, I think it's still commendable what they've done.
And your rating on 1 to 10?
I mean, sorry, was that
I'm asking you. I'm asking you. I'm asking you. How do you rate the budget on a scale of?
I'll definitely give it a 7 because, like I said, for me, budget should just be a charter and not really a complete big bang change. The fact that it's a big bang change means the government is not doing something right. So if the economy is indeed developing, then budget should just be status quo.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Mr. Agarwal, over to you. Your words on the wrap up and rating as well.
Very difficult to actually define a rating, right? With the limited knowledge that we actually work on. But see, considering I think several activities or the spends that they've allocated, which I believe is helpful from a long-term foundation perspective, I will also continue to go with 7 or 8, ignoring what I don't know. Right. So I think things which I know with respect to what they should be doing. Of course, I agree with Pallaviji that should have been done much earlier. Right. Benefits to individuals could have been done much earlier. I mean, more SOPs can be provided or benefits to be provided to entrepreneurs and MSMEs. But I think still based on what they have in hand, I would rate them at 7. In case, I think, as I think somebody mentioned that they were confident of coming back to power next year, I think there are a lot of activities that people would expect from them in the next few years with respect to, so the momentum they have maintained over the last few years, they have to continue, and not only continue, they'll have to actually increase expectations or exceed the expectations, right? Expectations from everybody. I mean, individuals, of course, has always been a very low-on priority for everybody, irrespective of the government. I think DTC, if I'm not wrong, sometime got introduced in 2010 and never came to picture, right? So I think middle class was always the people who have been ignored. I think some benefits to them. I think kudos, but I think there are a lot of work that they have to actually do. I think one important thing that they should be doing is implementing what they have been talking about the last several
Mm.
years. So there are a lot of policies and reforms. I won't say that they have not implemented a lot of them, but I think there are many which has to be implemented and have come to the board, right? So I think the focus should be implementation and on everything that they have been promising, and I'm sure that will continue to help them and the country over the period of time.
Okay, Mr. Menon, your final thoughts and the rating as well.
Sure. Again,
before we go into it, we have the editor of the Federal, Mr. Srinivasan, who has just joined us. So thank you very much, Mr. Srinivasan. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, just to borrow something.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Giri, there has been a lot of chat going on. I think there is.
Yeah, please go ahead, Mr. Srinivasan.
1 minute. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, hi Giri, how are you? How's been the discussion?
Hi. Yeah, so we have the panel right here, and Mr. Menon was talking to us about his wrap-up views and as well as rating. So,
okay. Great.
Yeah, please, Mr. Menon, please go ahead.
Sure. I was just saying that I'll borrow something from the financial market nuances that we go through every day. I think everything in life and in markets is about reality vis-a-vis expectations. So for me, I went into this budget expecting nothing much. I was just thinking that this will be
you did say that.
2 hours of a lot of general speech, which I've heard a lot. In fact, I actually chose to travel today, which I usually don't do. But then when I actually saw some of those measures, especially on the focus on capex and some of those deficit numbers they have been able to do, it has really surprised me on the upside. So to that extent, I would be happy to give it a 9 out of 10.
Okay, that's
we have to remember that it's a proposal, it's just a budget finance bill. I'm hoping that they will not reverse some of the key measures.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Agarwal, Ms. Singhal, and Mr. Menon. Thanks for participating in this discussion and taking time off to talk to all of us. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Giri. Pleasure was ours.
Yeah, thanks, Giri.
Mr. Srinivasan, you can take over.
Yeah, I'll take on from here. I welcome Professor Sebastian Morris. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, and Professor Morris is senior professor with the Indian Institute of, earlier he was with the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. Right now he is with Goa Institute of Management. Welcome, Professor Morris. I have also with me Raghunathan, K. Raghunathan. He's with All India Manufacturers Organization, and he has been highlighting the travails and problems of MSMEs, and he will make a very important contribution to this discussion. And I also have with me Vivian Fernandez. He's a senior journalist and a columnist and a regular contributor to the Federal as well. Welcome, gentlemen. Now, all of you have heard the budget, and I would start with Professor Morris. One request I would make to you, Morris, that Professor, that we have a very lay audience. You may have to really break down this budget and explain it to them. Were you surprised, or you were kind of sure that this is the kind of budget, first year of Amrit Kal, and the last year of last budget of the current regime? Is that how it would be? This is how you imagined it would be?
Certainly not many surprises. It was quite usual, I would think. Okay.
Right. So he has continued to press pedals on capex. Is that a big one? Continuation for the third year in succession, I think. A big bump of 33%. And but how would you rate? The announcement in the budget is fine. Whether there has been enough capacity to absorb what has announced in the previous 2 years. We haven't yet seen the private investment crowding in yet. Do you think it will take some more time, or is it a correct economic? As far as economic is concerned, do you think it's a right path he has taken?
Okay. You want me to comment on this?
Yeah, please. Yes.
Okay. See, the way I would see it is that, yes, this rise in capital expenditure, which has been continuing from the previous years, is something positive. However, if you want to measure the impact of this capital expenditure on demand, see, I'm starting with the presumption that demand is flagging. Okay. And we need to keep up the demand. And in order to do that, the budget has to push. Now, how much push does the budget provide is the question. Now, if you value the the capital expenditures are rising quite a bit. Okay, 26% or thereabouts. But if you look at the totality of expenditure, okay, the revenue expenditure minus the interest payments, because that's what the government is going to spend also, then that is barely rising by about 3.9%. Okay, so which in nominal terms is well below the nominal GDP growth, which is around 11%, 10%, which is anticipated. So that's not adequate. Now, if you multiply the capital expenditure by 2 for its impact, because the capital expenditure multipliers are known to be higher,
right?
Even then, you see, the totality of what I would call the total effective expenditure is a mere 11% versus 12.9% last year. Okay, so it's highly unlikely that the budget is going to give a big push to the demand side and hence to growth, because demand is what is constraining the economy today. Now, the second point is that, if you, let us say, take this argument further, where else can the demand come from? Okay, it could have come from a revival of private investment. Okay, but I don't see much going forward other than the PLI. I mean, many things like investment tax credit or reduction in uncertainties for the private investment could have taken place. I think the biggest negative over the last several years has not, and I'm not just talking about COVID, have been the rising uncertainty for the private industry. And I would say right from 12-13 onwards, this has been going on with no let up to it. Okay, latest data on GDP would show that the first estimates are always overestimates. Okay, the second estimates come down, and the final estimates are even lower. Okay, particularly when there is a positive growth. In the negative growth, it's the other way around. During the COVID years, and those are the only 3 quarters or so. But what I'm going to say then is that, see, we may not achieve a growth of more than what we achieved today, this year. That means we closed the year 2023, my guess is, with about 6.7% growth. It's highly unlikely we'll touch 7. And next year, we may just do the same at best, perhaps lower down, because the world economy is going to continue to be, right, to be rather problematic. Okay, so no new measures on private investment other than PLI. PLI is extremely uncertainty causing, as well as giving some marginal support. The only safe thing which I see is for the electronics industry, where some inversion in the tariffs have been corrected. Okay, and I think that's a very good measure, because we are an economy where the manufacturing sector has been killed for long years with inversions. Okay, the big thing is that, if you really look at the thrust of the budget, it is on certain assumptions. Okay, that look, IT, digitization, setting up portals is equal to improved governance, and so on and so forth. Okay, and that will bear results in terms of ease of doing business and efficiency. But the example of the financial sector, where would show that actually this digitization and so on may have imposed huge regulatory burdens on the industry, particularly on share operators, brokers, and so on and so forth. So today, enormous amount of effort is made in terms of meeting the regulatory norms. And my sense is the portals and so on would only increase. It might give value much later. There's a massive reduction in subsidies. Okay, massive. There's no 60,000 crores is provided for MNREGs, which is lower than what it was last year. But of course, the government has said that in case it's required, it will go.
No, but MNRGA, they always, this is the practice now. They initially allocate lower, later than midway, they increase it.
Sure, but the point is,
even the CAG has pointed out that shouldn't be doing such things. Yeah, please go.
Okay, so one hopes that it will be elastic enough and it would be demand driven. But the positive parts of the expenditure increase are really on rail and road, particularly on rail. Okay, and I think that's very positive. Now, if you look, and then on energy, which I don't really see why this should be the case, except that certain new forms of energy are being promoted. So the scientific departments will get a big thrust. Transport, as I said, railways would be there. Development of Northeast, but that's a small item, so it doesn't really add to expenditures, but the Northeast would have it. The surprising thing is that there is a huge expenditure increase on energy. Railways is not surprising because of the new minister and his ability to pull through and really carry out reforms. This is money which is going to go the right way. Okay. Now, so this is what I would say in the initial round, that my focus is on growth, and I don't think the growth will revive anywhere above 7%. Okay, that is the feeling one gets. It won't get back to those really good 8.5% growth that we had during the early years.
I think in some ways it is also anticipated because the buoyancy of tax, which happened based on lower tax base. So this year they anticipated 25% growth. For next year, I think even the revenue targets, they're scaled down a bit.
That's right.
So I'll come back to you. Let me have the first round from Vivian. Hello, Vivian. How do you see this budget?
Really, I have not looked at the overall budget, though I stayed for the full speech of the finance minister, in which he made many references to Amrit Kaal. Anyways, so what I like about the budget is that there is a big thrust on capital expenditure.
So one thing, Vivian, when you mention Amrit Kaal, this made me feel that though we are calling it as an election year budget, more or less this government seemed to have decided they won the election. In fact, if you look at everything is very long term in its approach.
Exactly. And she was saying that she'll be able to achieve the fiscal deficit target of 4.5% in 2025-26. I mean, so obviously they are not planning for to sit in the opposition. So as I was saying, overall I like this budget because there is ample thrust on capital expenditure. I would have liked the fiscal deficit to be reduced by 0.8%. The finance minister has reduced it by 0.5%, which means that for the remaining 2 years, the reduction of 1.4% will have to happen. So she's left the heavy lifting to the remaining 2 years. In terms of the capital expenditure of 10 lakh crores, about 2.4 lakh crores are on the railways. And I see that the capital expenditure on the railways have been continually increasing. The budget, for example, this year, budget estimate is 2,92,000 crores. Last year, it was 2,55,000 crores. And the year before, it was 1,90,000 crores. So there has been a continuous increase in the expenditure on railways. And I think that is as it should be. Prime Minister Vajpayee had laid a lot of emphasis on road development. I had expected the Modi government to emphasize on railways, and that is happening. But but I'm not sure about the outcome, because the bottlenecks still remain. For example, the economic survey says that till November this year, the passengers traveling by the railways were about 400 crores, which is half of what it was pre-COVID. Similarly, in terms of freight carriage, there has not been a substantial increase. So while there's a lot of spending on doubling, electrification, investment in rolling stock and all that, I don't see, a reduction in the logistics cost or an improvement in the carrying capacity of the railways or an improvement in their finances as well. So I don't know what's happening, number one. The other aspect, of course, is where I look very keenly is on agriculture, where the finance minister has made a number of feel-good announcements. But I find that their overarching vision is lacking. Because in agriculture, what we needed was a thrust on climate-smart agricultural technologies. That is missing. Instead, we find that the finance minister has given a thrust on millets, and this is the International Year of Millets. She's also given a thrust on improving the productivity.
By the way, millets have been renamed.
Yeah, she has renamed as the Shri Anna, which is actually not an original thing to do, because Karnataka in 2016 had called them Siridanya, which means rich grains. So,
but in Tamil Nadu, it is called Sirudanyam, means small.
Okay. So, I mean, that trust is required, and it also deals with the climate smart agriculture, because millets, after all, use less water. They are also socially useful, and they also are, plugged at the urban population, which is increasingly prone to lifestyle diseases. So on millets, I agree with the thrust, but I don't understand the thrust on improving the productivity of extra long staple fiber cotton, for example. This is Egyptian cotton, which we grow very little of, and there is no money that the finance minister allocated to back her talk. Similarly, there is a thrust on horticulture, which is as it should be. But overall, on agriculture, I find that what we needed was more R&D for new age seeds, for agriculture, from less agriculture, because we have to now shift from the green revolution to the gene revolution. So I find that missing. I find thrust on climate smart agriculture missing. So number of feel good announcements, but not an overarching vision.
But in agriculture, she has announced a few measures for more digital inclusion. Basically, information gathering, which will give crop prediction. Also, market.
There are a number of agri startups that are there in the digital space, but I don't think they have made much of a difference. It is quite possible that over a period of time, they might make a difference, just as in financial technologies. Digital has played a big role in making, in easing the payments, and that is because of the infrastructure that we had with the JAM Trinity, Aadhaar, and things like that. So over a period of time, it might make a difference. I am not saying that a thrust on digital agriculture was not required, but again, there is no money, no allocation made. For example, you have the agriculture accelerator fund, but no allocation has been made for it. So all these announcements are made. I also find a contradiction. On the one hand, this government has eased the regulations for gene editing last year. It has also approved the first genetically modified food crop, which is GM mustard. But in this budget, the Prime Minister is talking about training 1 crore farmers in natural farming. And natural farming is not compatible with sustainable intensification. It is land intensive. It is resource intensive.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I'll now quickly go to Mr. Raghunathan. Please, what's your opening remarks? You've been expecting with anticipation this budget, I'm sure.
Good evening, and thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah, go on. Thank you.
Okay. I'm completely speaking from the perspective of micro and small entrepreneurs, or self-employed, or gig workers. From that standpoint of view, this budget was expected to be giving a lot of relief, but it has not given any relief. None of their needs have been touched. Let me explain what are those needs first, then it will be easier for us to understand. I'm talking about the people who are painfully struggling to create profitability. I'm talking about the people who have been confined to a house for more than 12 months in a 24 months period to save the people from COVID. I'm talking about the people who have no big resources to backup support. I'm talking about the people who have to work and earn. Today, 30-40% of these micro small entrepreneurs have either perished or wound up. There are about another 20 to 30% of the people who don't know what to do, what else to do. And these are the kind of issues which we took it up with the finance minister and said, in the last 4 budgets of yours, you have addressed the needs of the people who are above all this, who are doing well or who could do well, who are running, and how could you make you do better. Now you need to look at the people who need oxygen to survive and don't give them again a Horlicks. And this budget gives them again a Horlicks. They have become exhausted. Now let's talk about the money part of it. There are lots and lots of entrepreneurs who have no access to finance from the formal sector of banking because last 2 year performance is bad or CIBIL score is bad. They are not able to repay even the existing loan. They are not able to raise funds. No answers given. They need securities. So there is a gap between the policymakers and the implementers. No one to address this gap. The second aspect is the last 4 months we have increased the repo interest by over 2.5%. What we cited as a reason was the inflation rates. Now the inflation seems to have come into control. At least for the small scale and micro entrepreneurs, the interest rate could have been given as a concession for at least next 1 year. How do they make profit is what should have been the concern, because they are now working hard and earn for the government through the GST, earn for the government through the income tax, or tax comes only when they make profit. So earn for the suppliers, earn for the staff, earn for their overheads, which have increased by 30 to 40%, and finally left with only debt. So they are not willing to do this continuously. They are not able to do this continuously. We thought we should have addressed. There is no news. We talked about unemployment. There are about 22 crores of people who are employed in the informal sector, which is majorly given by the MSMEs. Now, we talked about EPFO data. I am in the board of EPFO. And the EPFO data is about 5.5 crores of members who are in the formal sector. Thus, we are talking about an informal sector people who are not under the radar of the EPFO, who are 4 times that. So we are not worried about them. We are adding about 80 lakhs of fresh graduates looking for jobs every year. We don't have an answer for them. So this does not solve anything. Next, the future, next year, is very, very unsure. The micro exporters are struggling without orders in Coimbatore area because the cotton prices have gone up, yarn prices have gone up, manpower problems. And they are not able to know what is to be done. Whereas we are talking about nothing about them. We are not talking about easing them. There are about 11.5 lakh crores is outstanding payable to MSMEs. We are not talking about that. We are not addressing that. We are only making statements saying that within 45 days, MSME payment must be cleared. Then we came out with a scheme which was never understood by any of the state government to push through. So we have a problem. And this problem is well known. But the problem is not addressed. So you talk about now, the only thing which is left out as talking is the income tax rebate. Now the income tax rebate, you saw her statement, 9 lakhs earner. It saves about 12,000 rupees if he opts for the new scheme. That's all. Now 12,000 on a 75,000 rupees earning guy a month, 1,000 rupees saving, will it stimulate demand? Crazy. And we all want to clap for it. We all want to appreciate it. We all want to talk about how the futuristic India will be. We all talk about a lot of good things we are talking about. But let me tell you, the data tells us what is happening in the last 2 years.
Sorry for interjection. One question, Mr. Raghunathan. You know, the finance minister did announce this credit guarantee for MSME. She did say that, you know, we are infusing another 9,000 crores by April 2023. And, you know, it will create an additional collateral of 2 lakh. You know, are these...
It's the biggest, funniest statement. She should ask, first of all, herself. I have written a lot of articles in newspapers on the ECGLS scheme. It was 3 lakhs crore, which was sanctioned during the COVID, called the Emergency Credit Guarantee Scheme. Then it was extended by another 50,000 crore. Then it was extended by another 1.5 lakh crores. So it is now 5 lakh crore. It is now 3rd year. The very word emergency is gone because you are going into the 4th year. The very word credit guarantee is gone because the eligibility criteria has not made 90% of the MSMEs to come and avail this. Now, even today, out of 5 lakh crore which is available with you, the sanctioned fund is 3.2 lakh crores. The availed dispersal from the bank is 2.7 lakh crores. So why is that people have got the sanction but not availing it? Think. The reason is the banks are not giving that money in the hands of the people. They are adjusting it for the past dues. They are adjusting it for regularization, passing the buck on the shoulders of the entrepreneur. They are taking additional security, collateral security, which is already extended. There is a gap between the cup and the lip. 1,000 times she has been briefed. But you don't want to change it. You only expanded the eligibility of people. Originally, what you are supposed to be for less than 5 crore people or 5 crore turnover or 20 crore turnover has now gone up to 250 crore turnover can avail. Earlier, which was only for MSME, even a professional can avail. This is what we have done. So, what is the point of giving credit guarantee? Those who have not been eligible for that, where will they go? Is a question mark. That ECGL scheme is available, and there was another scheme called Fund of Funds, yet to take off. There is another scheme called equity infusion in the entrepreneur, which is meant only for a private limited company having a potential to go limited, which is normally a medium scale companies. Entrepreneur driven companies, 3 people, 5 people, 10 people working micro entrepreneurs, either the service provider. These fellows are left with nothing. Nothing, and nobody has a guts to tell her on the face in their office that this scheme is a waste.
Yeah, okay. I think Professor Morris would like to say something on this. Professor Morris, please go on. And I would, meanwhile, can I quickly welcome Dr. Pullarao Pentapati? He's he's an economist and a political commentator. And welcome.
Thank you.
I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you. Professor Sebastian, go on.
Yeah, just very briefly, this whole MSME question is going to be a very, very important question. Okay. What has happened is the employment collapse, which happened in the COVID, has not been made up. Okay. The unemployment figures are quite deceptive because the labor force participation has fallen. So if you look, the manufacturing broadly sector, which was largely MSME, fell by around 5.5 million in terms of employment. The recovery even today has been less than 4 million. So there's about 1 million, 1.2 million, employment to be made up. The unemployment figures are obfuscating that. Now, the reasons are not just the credit availability. No, credit is one thing. The demand side for the MSMEs has collapsed for a variety of reasons. One is the arbitrage anymore in the labor market has gone. Okay. Between the unorganized and the organized labor markets. Second is the GST has created a situation where there's nowhere to hide. So if anyway everyone has to pay taxes at the same rate, okay, the advantage shifts back to the large. So the large will pick up, and when the large picks up, the employment intensity is going to be lower. Okay, and that will hurt the MSMEs. The other thing is that there is nothing positive in manufacturing in terms of lower interest rates, which Mr. Raghunathan mentioned. But this is not a matter for the budget, it's a matter for the central banker. And we need to distinguish between the two. So he's quite right that I don't see the budget compensating in any way for the existing negatives against MSMEs. And it's highly unlikely that anything would happen because it's on a secular decline. What they call formalization is because of tax, because of labor market changes, and also because I would think that the government is explicitly encouraging the large in a variety of ways which are not being seen or which are not being obvious. For instance, tax breaks were given on the income tax side for large. Now, between large and small, there is no great difference also. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. I would quickly go to, Dr. Pullarao. You have heard the budget. I don't know whether you could read it because it's nowadays all digital. I don't know whether you could access that. But what do you make of the preliminary about the budget? What's your views on that?
See, one thing is what I have heard from other shows participating and listening is everybody says, is this the budget which Mr. Narendra Modi, Prime Minister, says the world was looking for? 2 or 3 days ago, I believe, he made a statement that the world is looking at India and its budget. It seemed a little bit of a grand idea, but now looking at it, one would say that perhaps in his mind or in the government's mind, they want to develop infrastructure in a very big way, not only to encourage the domestic producers or manufacturers or domestic capital, perhaps there's a strategy to attract all those large companies in China or even in Taiwan, which want to leave and find new places. And India may be trying to set itself up. Right now we hear that Vietnam has cornered or Philippines has cornered, and some beginning has been made. The Apple industry, Apple company has come and set up outside Bangalore. They're looking at some other sites for some other products. And also the chips. The chip sector also is looking at India. Government is trying to make it come to India. Perhaps all this emphasis on infrastructure, the roads, the railways, the aerodromes, all of this is perhaps in a way they're trying to make India a manufacturing base to get away some of these industries from other countries, which may want to even move from Europe to be close to sources in Asia, or even leave China for very obvious reasons that China has become a very controversial spot. That kind of starts making sense now, because I always felt that this huge investment in infrastructure, I mean, lakhs of crores a year, and in addition to that, even the railway budget last year, 1.4 lakh crores, this year, 2.4 lakh crores, never before in Indian history, as they say. So all of this, I used to feel it's too much, it's uncalibrated with our requirements. Yes, we need infrastructure. The minute you say we don't need infrastructure, one can't defend oneself. We need infrastructure, but should it not be in proportion to what the demand is, or immediate demand, or the near future demand? That I always felt was not in sync. We were just investing, and naturally industry and big business will welcome infrastructure investment by government. It helps their industries. It gives demand to cement, iron, steel, everything that they make, engineering sector. But now perhaps as we see that the huge exports of iPhones and other products, maybe India is, or the government strategy may be a little more well thought out than people like me have given credit. Those of us who are more weird, or at least always look that agriculture needs a little more, the rural areas need a little more because there are more people there, and all of that. So it does.
Okay, I'll take this as a preliminary comment. I'll come back to you. I have a few more questions for you. Before that, I think, Mr. Raghunathan, I think you want to leave. If you want to make any final remarks, you can. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I only wanted to quickly say only one thing, that everybody seems to be acknowledging the budget, but I wanted them to also know that there are areas which has not been addressed. It is not that it is not a bad budget, but it is a neglected budget. There is a section of people who are close to almost about 80 crores, as she said in her speech. 80 crores of people, if for 28 days were fed with food by the government at free of cost, we are talking 60% of the population were looking like a beggars from the government to be given with rice. We have never addressed them. After you give the rice, and if you stop giving the rice, then what will they do? Have they thought about it? We have come to that stage, or we talk only about the top 10% of the people and then create histories and create documents. The economist, so-called, needs to understand the pace.
I may not be ready by 11.
Okay.
Hello. Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
I could join online. Opportunity
if I have to
as
join
being the voice of the voiceless. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think excuse me for leaving now.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. We have another guest, TK Arun, joining us. Hello, TK. Can you hear me? TK, can you switch on your unmute and switch on your video? Okay, Dr. Rao. Meanwhile, we are talking of you're saying that a lot of expenditures have been made. That but isn't this a certain model of development which has been followed in Gujarat? Big infrastructure spend, and even don't economists prudently would agree that you make big investment in a manner that you ensure that it doesn't it does crowd in private investment, and you wait for a lag, and then the things start falling into place. Won't you look at it from that point of view?
to a certain extent, it's successful in one part of a country or one part of a unit where you're making these investments. It will not have a spread all over the country as large as India. Yes, they went overboard, did a lot for Gujarat. The government was in control from 2014. They invested a lot of money even now. If you're talking pre 2014, that's another category. But that works. At what cost? Should you invest a lakh crores? I mean, you're investing how many lakhs? For 10 lakh crores every year? A crore, lakhs. And just wait. What happens? You lose time, real time. And other sectors which require this aid very urgently, they don't get it. They're deprived. Well, this is a waiting time for the investments to mature, the investments to attract other factories, other economic activity. So there has to be a balance. That's what I feel. There has to be a balance.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Let me quickly go across to other guests. TK Arun is waiting. I also have Professor Deshpande. He's a visiting professor at ISEC, Institute for Social and Economic Change. Professor Deshpande, welcome. Meanwhile, TK, if you can quickly give your opening remarks on the budget.
I think the budget has been well conceived, and it serves the purpose of catering to different sections of voters in the penultimate year before the next general elections. It caters to the need for an economic stimulus in the economy, which has to come given the low propensity of the private sector to invest. The government itself to come forward and provide the capital expenditure. Hopefully, the private sector investment will be crowded in through this. And I think the government has also done well to not try to overcorrect the fiscal deficit by keeping it at 5.9% of GDP. Overall, tax collections have been buoyant, and even for the next years, the tax projections have been fairly conservative. I think it's a decent budget.
Yeah, TK, I agree with you. See, in fact, many people thought that it will be an election year budget, but in my view, he would continue with this kind of expenditure, big expenditure on capex and all, as he did last year as well. Because in 2018 also, or even the budget immediately after COVID, he did not relent on big expenses, big expenditure. But the question is, whether private investment has begun to come in. You haven't seen that yet happen. So do you think there will be more lag before you see those investments coming in? Because you don't see, the pumping in of big money has happened, but you haven't yet seen the private participation in a big way.
See, if you look at credit expansion, I think it might be kicking in. Credit has been growing of late. And if you look at the latest advanced estimates provided by the Central Statistics Office, the fixed capital formation as a proportion of GDP is now pegged at 29.2%, at both GDP and capital formation figures being at market prices. So that is quite positive. Actually, we needed this to be above 30% of GDP, probably 30, 33, 34%. While it hasn't reached there as yet, because it is still primarily the government, the fact that it has moved up from 27% to 29% over the last 2 years indicates that investment might be picking up. And another point which the chief economic advisor was at pains to stress yesterday in his press conference is that the bank balance sheets have been repaired. The banks are now in a position once again to start lending. Now, if the government can give them the assurance that a big loan will not be followed up with a visit by the CBI, I think the banks will actually start lending.
Right. But how much you think it will have an impact on, the private consumption, which actually fuels economy? It's 60% of that. I mean, would it result ultimately in the overall economy picking up?
I think so. So typically what happens when you invest is that the investment creates a multiplier effect. through multiple rounds of investment and added consumption. So while the proportion to GDP might remain where it is, 60%, that doesn't depress the level of consumption in absolute terms or the growth impulse it provides. Let us remember that when China was growing at double digit, its consumption was barely 50% of GDP. I mean, they were actually saving quite a lot and investing nearly 50% of GDP. Their investment rate was nearly 50% of GDP, or saving was 50% of GDP, and investment was 44% of GDP, and they used to have current account surpluses of 6% of GDP. So, as a proportion of GDP is not what really counts. Is consumption really going up in absolute terms? And that is actually the case, and that will continue to happen if investment really materializes.
Yeah, okay. I'll come back to TK for a minute. Let me just welcome Professor Deshpande and ask him, welcome Professor Deshpande, what's your initial remarks on the budget?
You said that it is not a pre-election budget. You see, there is a skill in doing the budget. It is easily masked, not to look as if it is a pre-election budget, but it is a popular budget. Mr. Modi has very clearly stated that his vote bank is middle class. We have to focus on middle class. Sometime back, he said it in cabinet meeting. And there was a book which has come out from a friend of mine who is a journalist, Media, Middle Class and Modi. The entire thing is middle class. So what he had done is tried to focus, or what finance minister had done, tried to focus two components, namely the middle class by tax concessions, and second, as earlier speaker said, that there is a huge investment which is in the public works in anywhere. Now, I say that this pays rich dividends because it creates employment. One, it is a showcase. The moment there is a big Samruddhi Marg taken in Maharashtra, everyone knows that a Samruddhi Marg is going. It's a advertisement without putting in the newspapers or media that Modi is doing work. Now, therefore, these investments are something which is pre-election strategy. Let me get back to the economics of it, the public finance of it. On the account of public finance, I feel that the budget is excellent because the fiscal deficit has been brought down to 5.9%. Tax buoyancy is strong, which we are getting significant amount of like this year. We are tax revenue itself is 23.3.
Yeah.
23.3 lakh crores, which is much higher, 3 lakh crores higher than last year's revised estimate, which means that as far as revenue generation is concerned, it is fairly good. But despite the revenue generation, the investment, or despite the revenue generation, the kind of allocations which should have been done on certain things has not been sufficient enough. For example, the investment in public sector, what I was looking at, the investment in the public sector, PSUs, JVs, SPVs has increased 8,000 crores to 34,000 crores. But the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, which was given 2,000 crores last year, was also 2,000 crores this year, which means that we have, on the investment front, what he is expecting is investment from the domestic investors. And who are these domestic investors? These are the people who had earlier kept their money elsewhere and bringing it in. I tell it in every public platform that the number of malls, the number of development projects, the high-rise buildings, suddenly from 91 onwards, or say 95 onwards, they started sprouting from nowhere. Where was this money? Where did it come from? And when you look at it, it doesn't come as foreign direct investment, but it comes from the very public. A huge about 1 acre of Mantri Mall comes from Mantri, which is a builder of India. Where was that money? Was it taxed? Was it not taxed? Certainly, the money was there in India, and money is there in India. And we don't have to search for black money elsewhere. It is right here. Right here. And how it is taxed, nobody knows about it. But then this is getting into investment. This is getting into investment. Coming to agriculture sector. Yes, one scheme was given, the direct payment to the farmers. Fine. About 2.2 million farmers are given. About 2.2 million money is given to 11.4 crores of farmers. Fine. It's 6,000 rupees. But then what is the rationale behind this 6,000? Should it be constant over years? In fact, when year-to-year growth in the investment in agriculture is concerned, working capital for agriculture is concerned, it increases by at least 7 to 8% every year. And this is thanks to the input markets, which has been growing at a rate which is more than double or triple, input prices going more than double or triple of long-term growth rates than the product prices. Certainly, the farmer fields or the cultivators. There is one very interesting thing. Who are these cultivators? Large number of them are the ones who find hardly anything for the investment. Small and marginal farmers form more than 80% of the total farm sector in India. Now, 6,000 to them for undertaking cultivation is something need to have been increased now. It's a good scheme. It's a good scheme. Certainly, it will help the farmer to buy.
No, I see what you're trying to say, but let's go back to an overall view of the budget. Are you trying to suggest that this is a popular budget?
There is
primarily aimed at. I think there are lots of caveats within that. When you say tax,
we use a rubbed off vocabulary. The rubbed off vocabulary is popular budget. It's not a popular budget because it doesn't seem to be that. And we are very happy with our vocabulary that call it a popular budget. No, it's not. It's a budget which is shrewd, which exactly does what it wants to do. But you can't call it popular budget because there are not freebies given in it.
Yeah. So even in the direct tax exemption, which is for the middle class, he is actually guiding towards a new tax regime, so which all the exemptions are gone.
Certainly.
So,
certainly, that is
but
a bit more. On the face of it, it shows that we are getting some benefit out of the direct taxation. Same thing true about in the agriculture. All over years, people have been talking about the millets and growth of millets. About 2-3 paragraphs, she spoke about Shri Dhanya, and what is the resultant of it? Establishment of a research center at Hyderabad Institute for Millets. Now, are we not having sufficient number of ICAR institutions which are doing research and development in millets? We have, but they are not taking it to the farm, and nobody wants to take it to the farm because culturally, over generations, millets have been degraded as not the preferred grain for the high class. Have you seen anywhere in any marriage or even Devegowda doesn't use ragi in the marriage hall. He uses only wheat chapati or rice. He speaks about ragi, but he cannot use ragi when the marriage feast has to be given. No ragi muddhe is served. The speaking is nice, but then doing is difficult.
Right. Thank you. Let me quickly welcome Professor Ramakumar. He is from TIS, Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Welcome, Ramakumar. What's your opening remark? Quickly, let's go through that. Yeah.
Sorry, this is the budget where there's some interesting tricks at play, in my view, and keeping cards close to the chest and choosing to play them at the right time as the year passes by. Look at the following numbers from the fiscal policy framework. your fiscal deficit is going to fall from about 6.4% to 5.9%. That's about half a percentage of the GDP. That's going to be a huge fall. And it's expected to fall to 4% in 2 years. So
4.5.
4.5% in 2 years. But what is happening to your gross tax revenue? The gross tax revenue is standing solid at 11.1% of the GDP this year as well as the next year. And your non-tax revenue is also going to stand solid at 1% of the GDP this year and next year. So essentially, if you keep GDP as the as a kind of a benchmark and calculate rest as a percentage of it, you're going to see a sharp fall of expenditures as a share of the GDP. You don't have GDP numbers of 23-24 in the budget, but I did some back of the envelope calculations backwards, and I found that the total expenditure to GDP ratio is going to fall from somewhere around 15.3% in the current year to about 14.7 to 14.8% next year. So that's going to be I mean, I heard somebody saying it's likely to be a expansionary budget and so on. It's not. It's actually a contractionary budget if you look at total expenditure by GDP ratio. By standards of fiscal consolidation, that may be justifiable, but by other standards, it may not be justifiable. That's one. Now that you have done this, it clearly shows that your expenditure must fall. Now, your expenditure must fall in some places, but then you cannot announce new schemes. If you want to announce new schemes, you need to create the fiscal space for those new schemes. How have you done that? You have done a clever thing in subsidies. You have cut your subsidies, allocated subsidies, from 5.2 lakh crore rupees to about 3.75 lakh crore rupees, which is actually a fall of 1.5 lakh crore rupees. Now, this creates a fiscal space for her to create new schemes, to announce new schemes. But why is it meaningless? It is meaningless because she has cut petroleum subsidies from 9,000 crore to 2,200 crore. She has cut fertilizer subsidy from 2.3 lakh crore to 1.7 lakh crore. Is this going to be viable? The government will have to raise fertilizer subsidy and petroleum subsidy as the year goes by, which means that all the new announcements that are made are meaningless, or expenditure will have to be cut in a whole range of schemes for which allocation has currently been made. So so she's created a fiscal space artificially and made a slew of announcements which mean nothing if these subsidies have to be reinstated.
Yeah, have you also looked at expenditure for education and health? I think again they're very meager.
Very meager. That's so. What exactly she has done?
3.8%. Yeah.
She has kept some new announcements in place for which there are some expenditures which are allocated, and for a range of other schemes, very minor, 30 crore, 40 crore kind of increases have been made in a range of schemes, which essentially makes it look like the total expenditure has increased. But if you look at total expenditure and the configuration of it, as I mentioned it has not.
Okay, Professor Ramkumar, that's I would like to bring TK here. I think he's raising his hand. Yeah, TK, go ahead.
I think Ramkumar made a very pertinent point. But what has to be borne in mind is that the Narendra Modi government's budget prior to the pandemic had constantly shrunk to all the way to less than 13% of GDP. In the 2020-21 budget was 16% of GDP. The 2022-23 total expenditure was 15.3% of GDP. And the proposed 23-24 budget, the total expenditure is actually 14.9% of GDP. Actually, the budget actually gives the GDP number as a footnote on the first page of that. Yeah. So it is still 15% of GDP, while as a proportion of GDP is 1 percentage point lower than what it was in 2 years ago. By traditional Indian budgetary standards, it is still a large budget. See, we are a country with a total tax collection of 17% of GDP, the states and the center combined. That's our fiscal capacity and fiscal capability. Globally, of course, France would spend more than 50% of GDP going through the government because they have that kind of tax collections. The average tax collection in the OECD is 34% of GDP. we are placed exactly half that. So there is a limit to how much we can spend without straining our credibility as a borrower on the market. So, but you're absolutely right. As a proportion of GDP, the budget will shrink in the next year. Now, what is remarkable is that the tax collections are budgeted to go up by 10.5%, exactly the same proportion as the GDP growth rate. So they're not anticipating any rise in tax collections as a proportion of GDP. However, indirect tax collections, which are actually they fall marginally lower than other taxes, 10.4% of GDP. It will be the budget will be rather than 10.5 in the case of direct taxes, which is not so bad. Now, the big thing is the capital expenditure. Now, it might not be fully from the budget, although they have said that. They might actually expect to supplement what is budgeted with the monetization of the monetization pipeline they have indicated. They have identified a number of toll roads and other assets which they hope they can monetize. And that money will come in. Some, of course, they will come through the budget. In the case of a subsidiary of some PSU, it may not come to the budget. It will be directly monetized. So, that really is speaking is the measure that will have an impact on the economy's growth dynamic. That is more an execution game than a budget outlay game. It's not really within the hands of the government. So
right.
I think so. The budget numbers, to my mind, look reasonable. India always had 15% of GDP during Pranab Mukherjee's expansionary budget by raising the fiscal deficit.
Yeah, but so, TK, isn't that finance minister has kind of the revenue projection itself has been slightly lower this time as compared to what it was, because on a low base, I think nominal GDP and also the revenue itself has grown very well this year. Yeah. But it may not happen next year because of the headwinds which you may face from what is happening. Geopolitical situation, exports may go down. There is a recessionary fear abroad, and all those things are coming in. So they may not expect the same kind of revenue next year. So in that sense, are you sure that they'll be able to meet this target? Because from the advantage they have taken this year, they may have been able to reduce the fiscal deficit. They may say that we are bringing to 5.9 and all, but is it feasible next year? Because the revenues may not be of the same order.
So there are two factors here. One is that they have kept some cushion as far as the assumed growth number. The economic survey said we'll have a real growth of 6.5%. And the inflation is supposed to be 5.8% according to the RBI. Which means we'll have how much? Okay, 12.3% of nominal growth, whereas you are assuming only 10.5% growth.
Okay.
So there is a cushion in how much the economy will grow and how much will the tax buoyancy be in real terms. Second, this is contingent on the economy actually growing on the strength of investments. So while last year we were merely announcing investments, this year we might materialize investment. See, you will find that companies like JSW is going into cement, into paints, which are all some kind of an indication. A traditional steelmaker venturing into paints is an indication they expect a lot of construction activity, real estate development, housing, etc. to take place, or office buildings to be materialized. All the concessions you are given for data centers to be built in India is an indication of a lot of construction activity materializing. The green hydrogen subsidies, Adani and Ambani will be able to avail of them only if they actually invest in green hydrogen facilities. So I would think that these investments would take place this year.
Yeah, Professor Ramkumar, obviously your formulation on expenditure itself is shrinking is very valid. But there's another point I'm tempted to ask you. You see, in the agriculture sector, they have announced some kind of a digital intervention, which means, they are even saying that, there are a few schemes which have been announced, and they're probably trying to create a new digital ecosystem where even price discovery may happen. Do you think it will help the farmers, especially in the case of where MSME, MSP and all those things, mandis, what happened in 2010? Following that, will it help the farmers in some way, at least, that they are able to find, if the data is there, they'll be able to discover price?
Well, the effort to use data for better price discovery is not new in agriculture. We have had a lot of experiments with futures markets in the past. We have had ENAM coming in fairly early enough. What we are now seeing is a next stage of it. Now what we are seeing is building of platforms like AgriStack, which essentially build different informations in one platform and make it available to people at a value. For example, you have the land revenue records are being modernized, and every land plot will get a kind of a unique number like the Aadhaar number. And then you basically are trying to link fertilizer subsidies, extension information, etc., all into that platform, so that it essentially looks like a platform which delivers not just information but also goods and other services. That is the effort. Now, it's not a new effort. AgriStack has a long history, but basically the key drawback in the implementation of such a thing is you do not have modernized or updated land records in the country. As long as you do not have updated or modernized land records in the country, any such building of a database with the land records as the primary foundation of it will be a non-starter. But there are other problems with it, which we don't have to speak about it immediately. There are questions of privacy and data protection, etc., concerns which have been raised with respect to such schemes for a long time, which are alive there, and which we need to discuss at a later point. But so digital platforms have been on for a while. This probably is a continuation of that, and but I see structural constraints to the realization of such an enterprise in the near future.
Okay. One more question to you, TK. I think probably TK said you want to go, he'll stay. Just one question quickly to you, TK, is 2 points Ramakumar made, Professor Ramakumar, is about the cut in subsidy, both fertilizer and fuel. You see, both the things are very much dependent on externalities. Basically, a lot of urea, 90%, I think we use, it's a lot of imported component in it, and the price have really gone up after the Ukraine and whatever geopolitical situation. The other is also the petroleum. Basically, we are lucky now that it's somewhere 80 per barrel right now. The assumptions have been made on the basis of all this. Even he's right in saying that these things may go up. So, how about these assumptions?
Yeah,
and also the external sector. Obviously, we haven't even spoken much about external sector. What might happen?
Yeah. So, if the world economy grows, then that will be a boost to our growth. The exports will grow, and that will add impetus to all the overall growth dynamics. At the same time, if the world economy slows down, then various commodity prices will actually moderate, and that is not bad for India. Oil prices will come down, and other metal and raw material prices will come down. And in the case of fertilizer, last year was exceptional because of the war in Ukraine. The Soviet Union, its successor state, Russia and Ukraine, these are both large exporters of fertilizers and fertilizer inputs. Those supplies got disrupted. This year, we expect the supplies to be more or less normalized. And India can probably import fertilizer from Russia even if the war continues. Hopefully, the war should also conclude before very long. I think these are the considerations in cutting the fertilizer subsidy.
Right.
I think they might even, they change the food subsidy structure. While you are giving free food, you have done away with some certain sections of food security subsidies. They might make a saving there also. But I think the primary saving on petroleum and fertilizer subsidy is on the assumption that prices will stay low.
Right. Now, let me quickly welcome Praveen Chakravarti. He's a political economist and chairman of Data Analytics Center of the Congress Party. Welcome, Praveen. Praveen, can you hear me?
Hear me?
Yeah. So go on.
Yeah.
What's your opening remark? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you wanted the opening remark. Now,
Yes. What do you make of the budget? You must have heard the finance minister.
Sure. See, I think the big story in the budget seems to be one of capital expenditure, as you would know. But so there's a big bet on capital expenditure. Now, economists will kind of tell you that capital expenditure can translate into real expenditure and benefit the economy only if there is an output cap and a slack in the economy. Because we have to understand the scale of expansion of capital expenditure. I think just a few years ago we were at about 3 lakh crores in capital expenditure. So to say that we can triple it in a matter of 4-5 years. I'm not saying it's impossible, it's possible, but that is a big bet. The second is what it also conveys. The reason why the government is forced to do all the heavy lifting is because the government seems to be the only batsman that is playing in the Indian economy today. The private sector is unable to. It's very obvious that the private sector investment is not taken off. Because of the global uncertainty, we can't export our way out of the economic misery or export our way to growth. So and obviously private consumption is also lagging. So that really leaves only the government as a key player. Now that's quite ironic for a party and a prime minister that came to power promising minimum government. But that aside, so that if the government has to spend and have a 45% increase or a 40% increase in capital expenditure in 1 year, where are they getting this money from? And it seems to be that very clearly there's only one area where they seem to have cut on the expenditure side, which is in Narega. And that's also deeply problematic, and I'll explain why. But other than that, the expenditure profile seems to be very similar, except for a big cut in Narega expenditure. And they've also committed to a fiscal deficit, lowering a fiscal deficit to 5.9%. And their nominal growth projection seems to be 10.5% compared to 15% this year. So I'm a bit confused as to what is the government kind of betting on here, because to say that I will spend all this extra money, but I will have a conservative GDP growth, and hence, and I will not be able to cut that much of my expenditure. I think there's something missing here, because even on Narega, the empirical fact is there has not been a single year where the government has not exceeded its Narega budget estimate. Forget the pandemic, I'm talking even before the pandemic. And yesterday's economic survey told us that there are 7 crore families that still are asking for Narega work this year. Mind you, this 7 crores is compared to, you can compare it to about 5.8 crores before the pandemic. So we're way above pandemic levels, even in Narega demand. So I'm a little confused about how the government's planning to limit Narega expenditure to 60,000 crores, because if people are demanding, you cannot say no to them. By law, it's a demand-based program. So if expenditure is going to overshoot the budget, nominal GDP is only going to be 10.5%, which means tax revenues, a buoyancy of 1 is an assumption there, which also is optimistic. then how can fiscal deficits be down, or how can you spend 40% more in capital expenditure? So something is amiss here.
Okay. So I would ask you a political question here, if you can. So obviously, it is not a normal budget in the sense that one could call it populist in the way we have seen in the past, where hundreds of announcements made targeting each and every section. There are nuggets which are couched within the budget. For instance, relief to middle class, relief to also pressing on with capital expenditure. Fiscal situation is also going to be very good. I mean, the real challenge here would be how he is able to sell the budget. I'm sure this budget, he can take it to people during election and he will be able to sell it very well, because you can see the indications of that in the budget as well. That economists all are going to welcome professional economists, because stock market has also already welcomed. Overall, it's a good thing that you are actually putting a lot of money to expand capital expenditure. You're not doing wasteful expenditure. You're cutting subsidies. All that sounds very well. So how are you going to counter that?
No. First, I don't belong to the school of thought that a budget kind of actually matters electorally anymore. I mean, I think I don't quite subscribe to that theory. The second is, I actually do agree that the capital expenditure is good quality expenditure. I agree that if we are able to pull it off, it is good quality expenditure. Now, to me, the budget speech actually sounded very much like an election speech, actually. Some this scheme here and that scheme here, and this for tribals and that for women, and almost like tokenism in some sense, right? But so when I made my opening comment, I actually made it more as a professional economist than as a politician, active politician. But and that's because I'm not so sure, people are going to vote in the 2024 elections in May, or even if it's earlier, based on what they have promised in this budget. I think for that, on economic matters, when it comes to voting, I think it is very, very clear that inflation and jobs are the two, and probably the only two issues that matter electorally. Now, you will notice that there was actually no mention of either of the two words in the budget speech.
Yeah, but sorry to interrupt you, but I would take a quick last question, perhaps from TK. Perhaps he wants to leave. TK, Arun, now you tell me. You see, this government is always in an election mode all through the year, and each and every opportunity they're able to convert into some kind of a political statement. I'm sure even this budget will be used very well, because ultimately it's the perception you're able to create. I do agree with Praveen that in the past you may not have been able to use budget as a tool for even electoral gains, but this government actually is very good at, for instance, now India, people actually consider the GDP is a very good thing. The growth of GDP, they all know. They feel that GDP, and they depend on this only indicator. If this indicator is good, the country is doing good. So they have forgotten price rise or inflation or, those kind of things. They now say, no, look, we are now 3. Now our GDP is, in the global ranking, we are number 3. Maybe soon we'll be number 1 also. So in this, what would be your final take on this? How much you think it's going to help this government? Because after all, this is going to be an election year. There are elections to 9 assemblies, and then there are finally general elections.
I agree with Praveen that the budget is not really meant to win elections. The budget caters to a certain section of people who pay taxes, the income taxes. So if you give them some tax breaks, it'll make them happy. Some even a much smaller subsection of the taxpayers who are economists, who bother about the size of the fiscal deficit and things like that, you throw them good numbers, they'll feel happy. But the mass of the people are worried about other things, like is that jobs or inflation. And of course, they are happy that India is being projected as the world's number 3 economy in terms of size. But, this is a government that believes in programs. It has very little sense of policy and very little sense of macroeconomic policies. It throws programs at the voters left, right, and center all through the year. So this budget also launches new programs, Mishti. There are so many other things, acronyms that are now created. The number of acronyms that has been generated by the Modi government since 2014, if you put one of your reporters to compile that with the number of program acronyms before this, I'm sure it will be quite revealing.
Actually, I think Akar Patel has written an entire book on just the acronyms.
Okay. So that is the style of campaigning. So that they will do. But the first paragraph of the budget says it caters to the needs of the poor, the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, the other backward castes, women. The only section it leaves out and loudly leaves out are the minorities. But of course, the economy grows as a whole. They will also benefit, and they have been benefiting from the government schemes, etc. So the budget does cater to different sectoral interests that the government is bothered about, and the government always likes to make tall claims about how it is benefiting people. And mind you, the drinking water from the tap scheme, Nal Se Jal, that is fully funded, and that has been implemented fairly well. Haryana, 100% households have water connections. Telangana has water connections. Gujarat has water connections. Some districts of Orissa have provided clean drinking water from the tap in at least one district, and is extending to other districts. So these are things that will actually make a tangible difference to voter behavior, and that is being fully funded. So it is be wrong to say that this budget doesn't have an eye on elections. Of course it has. In throwing up new schemes, in fully funding the programs that will actually make a difference. And, if it becomes necessary, they will let the fiscal deficit slip. And that will be claimed as a concession to the needs of the people. And we will actually meet that. After all, how many people are really bothered about the fiscal deficit among voters? Some rating agencies, some public finance experts will be bothered. The rest of the people don't bother.
Right. Thank you, TK.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye. I'll quickly go to Professor Ramakumar. There are two issues here I would like you to address in the budget. One is the capex. I mean, Praveen also raised the issue. Basically, he's raising a question about absorption. It's very well to make an announcement as one. We are still waiting for private investment to crowd in. But of course, TK has a different take on this. The real question here is the flagship of that is this PLA scheme. I mean, have they? I didn't really see that. Have they expanded that, or have they given any report on that? Because I didn't hear in the budget speech.
No, I don't think there is a real expansion of the PLI scheme in that sense. But what I quickly understand from the budget document is that there's going to be this increase in capital expenditure. What's there in the budget, which may or may not be realized. I'm just saying what is there as per the allocations. A part of it is going to railways. A part of it is going to roads and other infrastructure. A large part of the increase is being absorbed by these two sectors. But whether money will actually be forthcoming for this, suppose that's exactly what I was saying in the beginning, that if fertilizer prices rise and more money is required to meet that subsidy, or if food subsidy is required more, or if petroleum subsidy or fertilizer subsidy is required more, the cut will fall on something like capital expenditure. So you are unlikely to go beyond 7.5 to 8 lakh crore if that happens. Now, a lot of cut is likely to happen in revenue expenditure also, because the government has that fungibility at hand. So a lot of schemes, if you see over the years, some schemes get a very drastic cut in a particular year. And that's exactly, that's done precisely to save that money and puts to some other emergency purpose. So my broader point is there is a discussion that we need to have on the integrity of the budget or the integrity of the budget numbers. Is that integrity being compromised by ad hoc allocations or not giving full information to the public in the budget itself and holding back information to do something very different later? For example, elections are coming next year, but then we are going to see an interim budget in the beginning of 2024, and that interim budget, trust me, is going to be a big one, and a lot of things that they've held back this year are going to be carpet bombed on the public in the 24 interim budget, which is going to be timed for the election. So I'm not very sure whether budgets matter for elections or not, but I do think that the interim. Tell me, the Congress Party did not win the 2009 elections on the back of the loan waiver scheme announced in the budget previous year. It did. It did benefit from it. So it's not that it doesn't help. It does help. There's going to be an interim budget, and that's going to be the election budget, in my view.
Right. Now, quickly, I think we have our colleague Giri also joining in. Giri Prakash, can you hear me? Okay. Meanwhile, Praveen, there is one more question to you about the lot of emphasis on two issues here: green technology, and some of them was really good if it happens, because the carbon footprint, we need to reduce that. We are given certain commitment of attaining certain targets in global forums that we have to achieve. So this seems to be this budget seems to be peppered with a lot of such announcements. Could you really look at that? Because that's, you see, what has really happened is, whether it is agriculture or industry or other activities, industrial activities or economic activity, there's a lot of natural resources which have been severely damaged, and one expects a certain repair. And these are the measures which are necessary now. Do you think this budget is addressing that in a constructive way?
Yes, see, one is the entire aspect of climate and green energy. But pardon my cynicism here, I don't think it's any coincidence that Adani announced plans for hydrogen in July 2022, and there was a hydrogen allocation of 19,500 crores in today's budget. Now, similarly, I don't think Reliance bought Lithium Works factory in China and another factory in the UK last year, and to manufacture lithium-ion batteries. And the finance minister announced customs duty reduction for lithium-ion batteries. Now, still, the transition to green energy is welcome. I think it's also, I do agree, it's also an opportunity for India to actually enter into some new industrial activity that can actually be productive to the economy. But if it continues to keep getting captured by a few, I wonder what it means for the broader economy. And so green or blue, it doesn't matter if it's only going to be captured by a few people.
Right. Professor Ramakumar, one more question about exports. See, this year, obviously, one also expects probably a certain slowdown, because whatever impact you expect from the global headwinds, it is going to affect this aspect as well. It's one thing which is being expected, and they have fine-tuned certain custom duties, and especially extended some benefits to the electronic sector. And of course, mobile phones. They expect that India is probably number 2 or number 3. I think they want to reach number 1 position, or I don't know. There will be a lot of such things given. Do you think that this budget in some way is going to help us keep our exports up? basically the external sector, which is exports are very crucial.
There has been some tinkering of tariffs and other taxes, but I do not think that would be adequate to create an export-oriented growth path in any form. An export-oriented growth path is a far more serious issue in the sense that you need a lot of reforms in production to begin with, which will end up through the value chain, link up into the export story. I don't think that kind of thinking is present in the budget. What they have done is some tinkering. It's quite possible that industry or associations have represented on specific exemptions or reductions in tariffs, and the government may have agreed to a few of them, and they might have announced it with a lot of fanfare. For example, for example, look at agriculture. Agricultural exports have risen. Now, is it because of any innate strength in our agricultural system that agricultural exports have risen? Hardly. Our agricultural exports were not doing well till the pandemic year. And when pandemic began, there was a change in the global stocking strategies of the major importing nations of food. India could export a lot of rice to the eastern part of the world and a lot of wheat to the African western part of the world. And we could essentially make use of that gap or a vacuum that was created during the pandemic and capture a bit of the export market. Beyond that, is there an increase in the income of the farmer, or is there an export-oriented path in agriculture which is going to come to which is going to be there in the next 1 or 2 years? No, that's not the story that we see. So similarly in industry as well, I do see some changes, but I do see them only as tinkerings, not in the form of a strategic reform to create an export-oriented growth paths.
Right. Praveen, can you make your final comments on the budget?
Sure.
How do you rate this budget? I'm not giving you a scale. I leave it to you.
No, I don't want to be one of the CII types to rate a budget.
Yeah, I know.
No, see, I mean, I think to be fair, like I said, the directional shift to capital expenditure is welcome in the sense of the quality of expenditure going up. But for that to be funded through a cut in programs for NREGA is actually very ominous, because I think if nothing else, we are dealing, and not just India, all over the world, but certainly in India, I think it's no secret that the gap between the top 5%, 10%, and the bottom 75% is just expanding more and more. And it is these sorts of shifts that exacerbate this gap. Because I will also give you another data point, which has not been talked about. You know, when the government raises taxes and collects tax revenues, in 2009-10, out of every 100 rupees in tax revenues that the government of India collected, 45 rupees came from corporates and about 25 from what I would call Aam Aadmi, which is GST and indirect taxes and all of that. Today, it's exactly the reverse. It's exactly the reverse. So I think it's these sorts of shifts that I watch for in budgets that can have long-lasting impact. And I really worry that the shift to capital expenditure is coming from at the cost of programs like NREGA, which I do not think is advisable and is good for India in the long run, because our goal actually should be to minimize NREGA demand. I'm not saying we should encourage people to go get NREGA, but in fact, if you ask me what should be the one labor market goal or economic goal that we should have, objective, to minimize NREGA demand, because people will not demand NREGA work if they have other opportunities and better opportunities. And unfortunately, that is not the case, but that directional shift is problematic for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Quickly, thank you, Praveen. One final question to you, Ramakumar, Professor. Do you see this as some kind of Gujarat model we are seeing reenacting, where you make big announcement, you really spend big, you really spend on infrastructure like rail, road, but then leave out lot of rural development which you need to do, creating small roads in rural hinterland, trying to help a small farmer by trying to create some kind of a market system for him, do some kind of an aggregation for him. I mean, those kinds of, things which require less flashy, but a lot more work, but really help raise the incomes of those who are really on the lower strata.
No, that's a very good question, but that requires a discussion which will transcend the boundaries of the union budget per se, because a lot of it happens in state budgets also. The problem here has been, if you look at the fiscal deficit numbers of the central government, we see 6.4%, 5.9%, etc. But the question that we need to ask is what is allowed for the states? Now, the states are allowed just 3.5% of their GSDP in terms of their fiscal deficit, of which 0.5% is contingent on power sector reforms. So if you don't decide to do that, you get only 3% of fiscal space. Now, what kind of change can come in rural, local? Because a lot of money is spent through panchayats, a lot of money is spent through local governments and so on, which is the ambit of the state governments and their finances. So there is a squeezing of the finances at the state government level, which needs to come into the discussion to answer your question. The second part of the question that...
sorry, yeah, go on, yeah.
No, go ahead, sure.
No, I quickly wanted to ask, did you also see the grants in aid which has been transferred to which will go as a part of the capital expense to the states? I think, did you see that? Was it allocation good enough for...
It was an old scheme which had a 10,000 crore allocation, which was increased to 1 lakh crore allocation last year. We still don't have the numbers of how much has been given to states and what are the purposes for which it has been put. But nevertheless, the allocation has been increased to 1,30,000 crore this year. So we have 1 lakh, and that's part of your 10 lakh crore capital expenditure. That increase of 7.5 lakh crore to 10 lakh crore subsumes this increase of 30,000 crore from 1 lakh crore to 1,30,000 crore in under this particular scheme. So what I'm saying is, to answer your question, we need to take, because 85% of the social sector expenditure in India is undertaken by states, not the center. Right? And that means the elephant in the room is the state governments, and we don't discuss that when we put all the highlight on the finance minister at the center. That is the key issue. Second, even in basic infrastructure schemes, a lot of announcements are made with fanfare. I will give you the example of Agricultural Infrastructure Fund, AIF, for which 500 crore was allocated last year. But actual expenditure, revised estimates show, is only 150 crore.
Yeah.
This year, again, 500 crore has been allocated. Now, what is going to be the actual allocation next year? We don't know. It will depend on the budget mathematics and the integrity of the budget numbers, as we discussed earlier. So a lot of announcements are made with a lot of... Look at other announcements in this budget itself. There's an announcement on PM Pranam. I spent 1 hour looking for where the hell that money is going to come from. I couldn't find that word Pranam anywhere in the budget. My computer had at least 150 control Fs in every budget document. I just couldn't find PM Pranam. Then I found out that it's stuck inside some other scheme. So there's no way to know how much money has been actually allocated under PM Pranam. Then there is something called Gobardhan. I first thought it was Govardhan, then figured out it's Gobardhan, and then found out that it's actually under Swachha Bharat Mission Rural, which is under the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation. You just have to go and look for it and then find it out, right? So a lot of fragmentation of expenditures are there, very little, without much planning. Some allocation has been made. There is no clarity on what kind of outputs or outcomes are going to be forthcoming from these fragmented allocations. So a lot of rethinking must go into how a budget is planned as well. And that's where we miss the Planning Commission.
Right. I take it as your final comment. Actually, there's a lot more question I would like, but then we are running completely out of time. The next session has begun. I have my colleague Neelu waiting to get into the room. Thank you, Ramakumar. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Srinivas. Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye. Welcome, Neelu.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
How are you? What is that you're hearing? What's been listening?
It's just a very mixed reaction, and a lot of guests are already there with us. So mixed reactions coming in about the budget, but budget always remains a jugglery, a mystery. With me, the numbers is a huge issue. So I'm going to be discussing the politics of the budget and how we look at it.
Right, go on. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Thank you. So the viewers who are joining us on the Federal right now, good evening and hello and a warm welcome again on this Budget Day live coverage of the Federal Union Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has laid out the Union budget this morning, and she has basically focused on the main priorities, the 7 main priorities of the budget: inclusive development, infrastructure and investment, unleashing the potential, youth power, green growth, financial sector. Then she has focused a lot on the agri sector. She's given some relief to the middle class in the form of tax slabs. But the question which everybody is asking, she has even stuck to the fiscal deficit roadmap, saying that she's stuck to the target of 5.9%. But the question which everyone is asking is, how logical is this budget? Is it a mix of populism and prudence? And how does one really rate this budget when it comes to the concerns of the Aam Aadmi, the common man, and the business community? So we are going to talk about all these aspects, and I'm joined by a special panel. People are still joining me. I have with me BJP spokesperson Vineet Goenka. Good evening, Vineet. Always a pleasure having you on the program. Former Congress spokesperson Sanjay Jha, who has himself been a banker. Thank you so much, Sanjay, for joining. Then I have with me Dr. Akash Deep Muni, who is an Aam Aadmi Party supporter. Thank you, Dr. Muni. Siddharth Sharma, a political commentator, has also joined in. Dr. Sarthi Acharya from the Institute of Human Development and Studies. Thank you so much, Dr. Acharya, for joining. But let me begin by Sanjay, because Sanjay would be giving in a lot of information as to what has been the political reaction over Nirmala Sitharaman's budget. And Sanjay has to leave, so I thought I'll begin the debate with him. Yes, Sanjay, over to you.
Nilu, great to be with you on the program, and a big hello and good evening to all the fellow panelists. Unfortunately, I may have to go a little earlier, but I have a lot of respect for the views that I'm sure will be very enlightening for your audience. I want to make my answer very brief, Nilu. First and foremost, I would have liked it if Nirmala Sitharaman today would have acknowledged that the government was not fair to the farmers. I go back to the promise made to double the agriculture income for the farmers in 2017. That was supposed to come to an end in 2022. And guess what? Forget doubling the incomes. If you look at the real incomes, the farmers today are probably worse off if they haven't already experienced negative growth over 2018-19 figures. So clearly the government has been disingenuous with the promises it made, number one. Number two, this is not an inclusive budget. I mean, you have a situation today after the pandemic where there has been a reverse migration. People left the urban cities where they came to get a job, and they went back to their villages, right? Because the cities were under the great lockdown. And you have a situation today where Manrega payments have not been made. Manrega payments are in arrears. The number of households covered have been reduced. And I can give you the figures if you give me a couple of minutes. Number two, even the fact that in this budget, the allocation is actually down in nominal terms. So you're not even accounting for inflation. You're actually seeing a downsizing of the Manrega budget at a time when everyone who follows the social structure of a society, the inequality problem, said that this was a time for the government to bring a scheme like Manrega for the urban poor. Because end of day, that brings me to the third point. The big problem with the Indian economy is inequality. And I'm not going to quote Oxfam because Vineet will say Oxfam is a foreign conspiracy, or somebody from the BJP will say, this is concocted like the Heidelberg report, which has brought Mr. Adani to his knees today, as you can see, and whether it's a BBC documentary. But the truth is, let's quote the NSSO survey. Let's quote the PLS survey. What does it tell you? It tells you that 82% of the workers in India, you're talking about rural agricultural workers, you're talking about construction workers in the cities and so on. Today, 82% of them are actually worse off than they were 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, these are certain factual realities. Now, you can't try and, kind of bludgeon them over by saying, I have a cylinder scheme, or I give, some kind of a PM Awas Yojana, and we know that.
Are you trying to say that the budget has not addressed the immediate concerns of the common man?
Absolutely.
And it's talking about a long-term vision statement.
Absolutely. I'll tell you why that's relevant, Neelu, and I would love to hear the views of Ashutosh, Akash, Siddharji, Sarthi, and Vineet as well. But I will definitely watch the recording later. But the truth of life is that you are seeing a phase under Mr. Modi of jobless growth. Over the course of the last 8 years, I think Mr. Modi's legacy will be the destruction of the demographic dividend story of India. I think, what is the story today, right? That India is a young country. China is aging. Are you taking advantage of that productive capacity? The answer is clearly no. And the point that we cannot ignore, unemployment is at around 8.3% in December. It means that roughly, you're talking about 80, 90 million of young people in this country without jobs. This is serious. And don't forget, Neelu, that at the time of the pandemic, and I'm going to quote to you CMIE data, the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, that once again, I'm sure Vineet is going to trash. I'm trying to preempt Vineet as much as I can. And sorry, Vineet, for that. But the truth is that you guys trashed the CMIE report. But so let me quote to you the fact that end of day, did not the urban Indians lose around 10 million jobs? What are 230 million people pushed into poverty, becoming the new, I call them as the new poor because they went below the poverty line? Can you deny the fact that at the end of the day today, the coverage of people who are, I think, desperately in need of some kind of a minimum wage, or I would even say that your government should have surprised everybody by doing a nyay that Rahul Gandhi and the Congress actually espoused in 2019. This is the time when you need to boost consumption and demand in India. And I can tell you something, Neelu, that end of day, why is private sector not investing? You see, I'm trying to cover as much as I can before I go. Private sector is not investing because at the end of the day, they have to also see demand. And you cannot have demand until you have people with income who are spending. Now, you see today, the people who had incomes before, the middle class has shrunk. Their income has shrunk. They lost their jobs. So where are they going to have income to spend? And you are not providing enough incentive to people to spend by providing them income. Give you an example. Look at the middle class today. Middle class lost jobs. Middle class is paying through its nose on fuel duties and fuel taxes. We all know that the price of fuel that they claimed went very high when the Ukraine war happened. Today, the price of fuel has come down substantially. Have the fuel prices come down?
Sanjay, from what you're saying, it looks like a very anti-poor budget.
Anti-middle class as well.
Anti-middle class as well. But does it cater the concerns of the corporates? Because I've heard many people saying that this is a very corporate-friendly budget. So would you agree with that?
Well, let me tell you, the hope that Vineet's party has is that because you are having a lot of infrastructure spend, that it will crowd in private investment. But look at the fact that the private investment is really not coming despite the fact that they gave a massive 1,45,000 crore tax concession in 2019. There are no jobs. Private sector investment hasn't gone up. So the $1 million question remains that it hasn't happened. And I think the principal thing that we cannot ignore today, and I want to leave it for your panelists because they're all eminent people, is why is Gautam Adani's group hijacked the budget day today? Complete lack of corporate governance. You have an FPO which is subscribed yesterday, which is tanked 30%. It's unheard of. You have Credit Suisse, which says that we don't want to even touch the Adani stock because we believe it is as good as a junk bond for a collateral. What kind of a signal are we sent already to the foreign investors that this country is running like a banana republic? And we all know, and I'm sorry I've got to make this political point, that Mr. Adani's meteoric rise, 85% of his growth happened in the last 3 years, has happened on account of political patronage. I'm not going to name who it is because you already know who's behind his success story.
Okay, so it's neither a corporate-friendly budget. It's neither an anti-poor or an anti-middle class. It's basically an anti-middle class budget. So Dr. Ashutosh Verma from Samajwadi Party has joined us. Thank you, Dr. Verma, for joining. But where is this budget heading to? If it's not meant for the poor, it's not meant for the farmers, it's not meant for the middle class, it's neither meant for the corporates. So what is the long-term goal of this budget? Is this budget a piece of a trash, what we are seeing this year?
So I will not call him as a piece of trash, but I gave him the term, it's just a maze of words. how this BJP government has used. They given no relief to the middle class person, neither to the peasants, neither to the lower class. And the most popular way they are saying that's the new tax regime. I'm very sorry, but there are a lot of economics. They are talking in today's TV debates that they have given a new relief of 7 lakhs. I have just explained why. How 7 lakhs? Because initially we were getting a relief at the 5 lakhs rupees. Then we are getting about rebate of about 1.5 lakhs in ATC. Then we were getting a rebate of about 50,000 rupees on the NPS. So cumulatively it was 7 lakhs. So either you hold the hair from this way or you hold the hair from this way. It means the same. So it's just a maze of words what we are seeing right now. And BJP is very expert on all these things. Even I can't expect anything much more better than BJP on these policies. Then they are saying that they have given a relief to a middle class family. I'm sorry, I too am a middle class family. I have taken several loans for my home. I have taken several loans for my car. Definitely, the people are taking loans for their studies for their children. Has they given a single point rebate in the repo rate? No. Even in the COVID areas, after COVID areas, they have said that you are giving a time to repay your EMIs, not a rebate at that time. So it is again a jolt to us. It's very pathetic that government is not thinking about this. Then we come about, we were thinking something about old pension scheme, which is a long talk. This is our vision for Samajwadi Party to implement the old pension scheme. And the employees are still waiting. Will give either old pension scheme, revive old pension scheme, or they will give something new way to relieve them. But no word for them also. Lots of state and central employees got disheartened with this. Then about Kisan Samman Nidhi. You are saying that's a farmer friendly. I am sorry. How could we? You are creating a regular increment in petrol and diesels that the transport are now too costly, but you have not even improved a single rupee in the Kisan Samman Nidhi. So what you have given? You have not talked about the MSP, and this is a total jolt because about a year ago, just the Prime Minister has said that we are rolling back the 3 farmer laws, and we will think something about the farmers of the India, and they always say that they are the backbone of the country. A single motto fight is there of the MSP. The whole budget session, this word we can't. We are just harshly said that we are not even heard a single word about the MSP. No MSP, no level price, no GST decrement on the farmers procurement of their instrument. So I think it's a huge jolt to the middle class and lower class. If we talk about the youngsters, they see, so inflation is too high. And as the earliest spokesperson has said that about that what we're saying unemployment. So when unemployment is there, you have to either create a new job or you should do something to create a new job. Instead of that, you are giving some handsome amount of money to the unemployed. So what you are making is the visionary. You are making a huge chunk of unemployed India's, and the youth are just wearing. Then you are taking that you are a Rashbhak Sarkar. You have given a budget of railways, but not a single point on the defense budget. What about a defense budget? I was thinking that education. I can't expect Bharatiya Janata Party to spend more on education. But what you have done, you have decremented the education budget from 2.64% to 2.5%. Means you are not interested in educating the India. Definitely, you are giving some of the employment.
Basically,
and same in the health. You have decremented the health budget from 2.2% to 1.98%.
Okay, so Dr. Verma, I'll come back to you again. Yeah, I'll come back to you again, but you've specified it very clearly that the social sector allocations have been dismal, including the defense sector. I'll come to Dr. Sarthi Acharya, and then I'm going to come to Siddharth and Vineet. Vineet, I'll come to you last because you'll have loads to answer. So let me go to Dr. Acharya first. Dr. Acharya, how would you really see this budget? Does it look like a populist budget? Or does it look like a prudent budget or a mix of both? How would you really rate this budget?
Neeru, to begin with, I must say budgets are not statements of any kind of a long-term structural change or anything. They're year-to-year changes, all right? But they must be on a path where your long-term goal, whether it is sustainable development goal, full employment, 5 trillion economy, etc., these have to be met. Now, if you look at this budget, let me quickly say, it's more of the same. We've been talking about green growth for the last, 10 years, 15 years?
Yes.
Since Rio, we are talking about more of the same. We're talking about jobs. Where have we invested? Traditional jobs. So more of the same, not shifting the jobs from the traditional sectors to modern, but modernizing the traditional jobs, which means high elasticity. That means low incomes, frankly.
Right.
Youth, we are talking about skilling, but frankly speaking, if you look at it last 10 years, we have scrapped programs of youth skilling at least twice.
Absolutely.
When I came back from the United Nations, the first job I was given was to evaluate a program on skills. And we found it was absolutely trashed, and the government then trashed it. We are still talking about youth. Then we are talking about CapEx. We've been doing CapEx, rather good, I must say. But it's more of the same.
Right.
We haven't talked about what CapEx are we talking about. Are we talking about bridges? Are we talking about roads? Are we talking about ports? What? This is yet to be done. Then more of digitization we are talking about, which is happening for the last several years. We're talking the same thing with MSMEs. The only major differences I see are diversification in agriculture. To what extent it happens, we yet to see. But for the first time, they are talking about diversification of agriculture into a new direction. And the other thing which I find very useful is that IITs and 100 labs are to be given money
for the 5G applications.
For applications and some R&D. But I have serious challenges as far as this budget is concerned. That if we are talking about this being a step in the long-term goal of 2030 or 5 billion or whatever, we are talking about manufacturing, in which what are we doing? We are trying to give more of, I would say, SOPs to industry in the form of, money. The SOPs don't create production. They permit you to import products in this country. So Samsung has the biggest factory in this country, in the world, in India. But 85% of those products are coming from Korea, Japan, China, etc. And just putting it together. And then I don't know whether we are losing money or gaining money, but the point is we are definitely not indigenizing that technology to make a Make in India.
So, Dr. Acharya, if I may ask you,
excuse me 1 minute. Now, digitization is good. I must say digitization is very good. But are we looking at what it costs to have a hardware for digitization? We are nowhere in hardware. So the more digitization we have, the more of hardware we'll require, which is really, to be imported. And every 6 months, if a chip is going to be changed, it's going to be increasingly expensive. And then are we talking about power? Digitization requires at least 3% of total power will go into digitization.
Right.
We haven't talked about power at all in this. Then put it this way, not a word about education in this. We haven't talked about health. We've talked about health. But the point is, look at where the health sector is going. It's 5-star deluxe hospitals where no common person would go. So that's the health sector which is expanding. Are we talking about creating public health institutions? We are not talking about public hospitals at all. And finally, I must say that a lot of high-value persons and companies are leaving this country. I think the numbers you would be knowing better than me. I've heard different numbers. The fact is we are losing foreign exchange to this country. That means the rupee would be losing further and further. Startups. Finally, I would say we are talking about startup. Great thing. But what is a startup? A startup is a new idea to be translated into practice. We are not talking about the same markets. We're not talking about the same education. We are not having startups like China where they're talking about AI, where they're talking about automation or solar energy or anything. We are talking about marketing. We are talking about Baiju's education. These are not startups.
Yeah.
New industries. And finally, the only word I would say is that this 5.9% of I would say fiscal deficit is a highly unrealistic figure. This will definitely jump this figure.
But Dr. Acharya, are you hinting at the fact that the finance minister has not taken into consideration the global recessionary headwinds which we are seeing around the world, and that has not been taken into consideration, and this fiscal target is something which is very, very unrealistic, very much out of the blue? A short comment on that, and then I go to...
Very short, yes. Now, the point is, when does the global recession come into the play? It comes in when you are exporting huge amounts of money, and those economies not growing will not be able to take your imports, right? Imports from here. What are we exporting? What is it in this budget for export? It's all import-oriented budget. We're going to import more and more. So we are actually helping those economies rather than our economy.
Right.
So, I mean...
Yes. Yes. So, Dr. Muni, I'll come to you now, that if the budget has not addressed the immediate concerns, it doesn't address the concerns of the common man, neither of the corporates, neither are we taking into consideration the global headwinds, then what has this budget really achieved today? If I were to look back in the evening and recall this budget, what are those points for which I will recall this budget really?
This budget we would recall for headlines specifically.
Okay.
Because just imagine, after COVID, we all knew that our education sector, where our students didn't go to the universities for 2 years, our education sector needed major boost. Our health sector needed major boost. Interestingly, our health sector, the allocation has come from 2.2% from the previous budget to 1.98%. In education, it has come from 2.64 to 2.51. Interestingly, the rural sector, which really helped our economy be high during the COVID. Do you remember, Neelu? That time, it was the rural sector which pumped up our economy. And the allocation for rural sector came from 5.81% to 5.29%. This is astonishing, and this is hazardous. Interestingly, you remember we talked about doubling the MSP. The government talked about doubling the MSP. They have not done it. They have said nothing over it. They even have not brought down haven't subsidized urea specifically. And interestingly, the talk about 7 lakh rebate, and till 7 lakh there is no tax. If we calculate MPS, ATC, and the tax rebate in the old scheme also, we have got till 7.5 lakhs. There was no tax. If they had to, now one important point, if they really had to empower the common man, they would have enhanced would have increased in the old tax slab rather than in new tax slab. Why? Right. Let me explain. I want to tell you all viewers that if they would have increased in the old tax slab, they would have motivated people for savings, so that in future there will be brightened. But they have motivated people for spending, so that common man go on spending, and who is benefited
paying
by
tax.
It? We all know. The corporates and the tax, they pay tax. So this is a very vicious circle that has been created specifically in this particular case. And I'm really saddened by the way.
But Doctor, okay, let me go to Siddharth then. From what you're saying, Siddharth, are you able to listen to me? Yeah. So has the government really bitten the bullet? Because in the election year, when you just have few months left for the election, government could have been more prudent or could have been more populist, but it doesn't seem to address neither of the points. So what would you say that what has been really the vision statement behind today's budget?
Well, Neelu, any budget has a context as well as it is a report card, and it has to have some vision. Now, this budget, the context of this budget is the economic survey that came out yesterday. And that is a report card of what happened between the last budget and its deliveries. And one thing that has come out from this year's economic survey is that in Indian households, average savings have come down half compared to pre-COVID times. That means average Indian saving is down 50%. That is the economic survey saying. Now that also means that there is rising inflation and price rise in India. Now, compared between these two, first let me say that I'll be a bit lenient towards the budget today for the simple reason that a budget, whether a government is in majority or a minority, finance bill is not voted upon, and whatever budget is presented is going to be the economic map for the next year, irrespective of what the government is. So a budget, whatever its merits are or demerits are, it's better that that budget is successful. That is what, otherwise there'll be chaos. So for that sake, I'll say that this budget also takes care of a few issues that obviously Vineet will say after me. He will highlight the positive points of the budget, and I agree there'll be positive points. Now, coming back to what I'm saying, India is 140 crore people. Imagine a neighborhood of 140 people and one hospital catering to that. Now, in that hospital, obviously, there'll be certain patients in wards, certain patients will be in ICU, and certain patients will be getting discharged. Now, imagine on one day, say today, 2 patients get discharged, and the hospital says, okay, since you have gotten well in our hospital, go home and start taking this tonic. Good enough? Now, that is it hiding the fact that there are other 50 people in the ICU? And remember, in an ICU, you do not give them tonics. In ICU, you have to give them medicines. Tonic is for healthy people to stay healthy, and medicine is for a sick person to get healthy. Now, what the BJP has been doing, or this government, this budget has been doing, for example, the tax slab rebate that they have been speaking about, the 5G rollout that they are speaking about, these are the things that are tonics for those people who are already above board. But the fact is also that between COVID and now, 4 crore people have reverse migrated from cities to villages, and that amounts to total 50 crore people in India. Now, with 50 patients in the ICU, 50 crore people who are today rural, workforce, agriculture. When you say rural, that means workforce, physical labor, agriculture, and living in rural areas. So now, just the speaker before me told that the rural budget has come down from 5.8% to 5.3%. What does it say? Unless you are going to take care of your ICU patients, give them proper medicine and discharge them, a hospital cannot pat itself on the back by saying that I have today discharged 2 patients with certain good tonics. I agree that 2 patients have been discharged with good tonics, but 50 people are still inside ICU. And the only way you can ameliorate the problems of these 50 crore people, there are only 2 ways to do that. Either you do direct cash transfer, the way England or France did during the COVID times, or you make sure that the rate of taxes come down. That is the only 2 ways through which you can put money into people's pocket. Now, this has not happened. Why has it not happened? The reason is very simple. Preparation of the budget can happen through 3 perspectives. A government can think, I am making a budget for the government. A government can think, I am making a budget for the industry or the corporates. Or a government can think that I am making a budget for the people of India. I think what has happened is that this government has made a budget considering itself as the focal point. The budget is in profit. The government is running in profit, but it has not given consideration to either the corporates or the industry or the common man. So this is a perspective problem that the government has gone through, I believe so. Having said so, there are certain issues that are good in this budget. And I sincerely feel that any budget that has been presented, it has to pull through, and that because that is going to be our roadmap for the next 1 year. So I wish the budget all the time.
Okay, so now over to Vineet. Vineet, very few people have something very bright and positive to say about today's budget. And you've heard all the pain points. We have been discussing it for the last half an hour. But what I'm wanting to understand from you is that what has Nirmala Sitharaman or what has the Modi government tried to achieve through this budget? The deficiencies in the budget, the structural points, the global deficiencies, wherever, the government had to address, those things have not been addressed, whether it was a common man, whether it was the corporates, whether it was the MSMEs, or what has the government tried to achieve through this budget?
So Ram to you and all my panelists over here and the audience who will be listening to this. Thank you for inviting me. After listening to all the august co-panelists, I felt Bharatiya Janata Party and the ministers of Bharatiya Janata Party don't come from political spectrum. They are genuine people, probably, who does not understand business of politics, or they don't understand budgeting, or we are not realizing that the next year there is election. Thank you for that this budget is not election-oriented populist budget. Let me tell you certain considerations. Last 1 year, or rather last 3-4 years, we have seen global economical challenges. There may be COVID, there may be Russian-Ukraine conflict, that may be the global recession which is going on. Yet, why do corporates come to India and we have seen this inflow of FDI, and why have we seen employment? I'll give you one small example. And these are real numbers, not driven by government, but non-governmental research organizations. The ease of doing business, where the minimum government and maximum governance can be seen, where the transparency is key. 7,496 reforms has been implemented, unprecedented. The number, I repeat, 7,496 reforms. 39,000 compliance has been removed, reduced. Earlier, businessman is to fill a form and meet the inspectors. Now 39,000 total forms have been reduced. 3,500 provisions have been decriminalized. So whoever spoke before me about corporates or businesses not getting anything, please tell me, when you decriminalize the provisions of income tax, the indirect taxes, when you remove 39,000 compliances, do you not allow the businessman, the small entrepreneur, to get into business mode rather than doing the paperwork? So, number two, IMF is not run by Bharatiya Janata Party. Rather, I can very carefully say that they don't even, may not be liking us also. But it is factual that what they have projected as a growth rate, US, they have projected it will come down from 1.4 to 1. Whereas they have projected for Japan that it will come down from 1.8 to 0.9. And India is the only country in the top 5 list, which they have projected that it will move from 6.1 to 6.4, which is only one particular economy which has been seen as positive. Now, I really don't know where the figures of the earlier speakers came from. Now, when we have seen the Western economies been collapsing and the buying powers have reduced, Indian export or any other exports depend, or the exports of our material, which indirectly gets into the Western world, which is facing the challenge of fuel because of the Russian Ukraine conflict. The buying powers, their buying powers have come down, but yet we have seen a 16% growth on export with $332 billion export being done. Now, doesn't it speak volume where a country which has faced COVID, which has faced other challenges, the numbers, and these numbers I'm quoting from IMF. I'm not quoting yet the figures of economical survey, or I'm not quoting the figures from Indian the budget right now. With all the challenges, the foreign reserves in December 2022 have gone up to $562 billion. While the government has been feeding 80 crore people post-pandemic. See, the commitment was not to allow a single person to sleep hungry. No other government in the world ever been heard to feed 80 crore mouths every day. That kind of thing. So let me tell you one thing. If you talk about CAD and other things, we can go on and talking about this particular part. One particular part which I like to tell you, what was the growth driver? The growth driver was 63.4% of the increased capital expenditure in the first 8 months of the fiscal. Now that is driving the force. And a simple thing, the service sector, which talks about where a lot of MSMEs work, the middle class get benefited. People like you and I, we come from there. 2021-22, the gross value which was there was 8.4%. Whereas in 2022-23, the gross value has gone up to 9.1%. In the service sector itself, $7.1 billion FDI equity was transacted. Now, please tell me, isn't that a positive thing? Anyway, even if you feel so, we had a great prime minister who said, when I send 100 rupees, people get only 15 rupees. I don't want to quote him. May his soul rest in peace wherever it is. But we took a lesson from that. And we introduced JAM, J-A-M. And we now know that due to jam, the leakages have been nipped. When we send 100 rupees, the 100 rupees reaches the last beneficiary. A, in the terms of money. B, in the terms of dignity. We all know that when a woman, my sister, would go out for getting the benefits, there were middlemen who may take advantage of her. Now, because of a direct benefit transfer, no woman's dignity has been touched. She has not been subjected to humiliation or any kind of subjected. And this could not be achieved just by saying anything. What we have done is to help this zero leakage of public funds. 83.68 crore internet users were been added, or the total the number which comes is like that. The infrastructure for JAM basically requires an internet. Right now in India, more than 7.46 active telephone towers are there. Now, this digital power allows the benefit of the democracy to travel like you get it to the last person who is there in the village. Unprecedented 1.32 lakhs. Prime Minister,
let me interrupt you here. The points which you are trying to explain, most of these things were mentioned by Nirmala Sitharaman as well. But what I want to understand from you is, people like P. Chidambaram, they have very clearly pointed out that this budget doesn't have anything for the poor. It has not mentioned the words unemployment, poverty, inequality, or equity anywhere in the speech. Now, why are people trying to decipher the budget in that direction? People are saying that this budget is directionless. Prime Minister says that it's a long-term vision statement for the next 25 years. Of course, the focus has been on laying down more railway lines, building roads. All that is fine for building the nation. But what about the immediate concerns? Unemployment you have not addressed. Economic disparity you have not addressed. From where will the people get employment? What are those vehicles of employment? All that has not been addressed very clearly. So how do you really placate the common man today? So they would end up saying that it's just a Jumla budget, or it's just a bundle of promises which will never be delivered, apparently.
So my earlier speakers asked me total 32 questions, and now in your second phase of asking me question, you've asked me 8 questions. The total 40 questions been asked. You also quoted a great economist, P. Chidambaram, who has been tried and has been investigated by a lot of agencies and probably the court also. And because of his populist budgets, India lost a lot of money, and also the government of then government lost themselves in the election. So let me not compare about him, and let me go back to the realities. We understand people, and
but what he's pointing out, can you dismiss that?
Of course. So if you allow me to speak, I'll dismiss that.
Yes.
So whatever he may speak, but we have to build this country, and we have built this country. If you can ask that gentleman whose name you took, how many kilometers of highways he has created. We created 1,44,634 kilometers of highway. Ma'am, you would know that civilizations in the earlier eras were next to the banks of river, and now they are next to the roads. So please travel with me across the country. You don't have to worry. Your car can drive more than 100 kilometers per hour, and you can reach each and every corner of the country because of the road network.
I'll come to Dr. Verma after this. Yes, for a quick response. Yes, go ahead, Vineet. Go ahead. And then Dr. Sarthi. Yes.
I like when you interrupt, because that gives me a opportunity to think and to give you more pointers. Thank you for interrupting me again and again. It helps me to allow me to think. Somebody pointed out that jobs have gone down. Let me remind the gentleman, EPFO, the Provident Fund Office, releases the number of people who are paid PF. That is the organized sector, the people who PF.
Right.
It is doubled to 27 crore. Madam, nobody pays PF on behalf of you if they don't employ you. Only they pay your PF when they employ you. Now, these are the real figures, which Chidambaram may not understand probably. The unorganized sector, which is there, which may not pay PF, 28.5 crore workers have registered on e-Shram portal. They don't register, and the employer will not allow them to register without there. Somebody also talked about, farmers' income. Animal husbandry in the last 5 years for better milk and meat. I had never thought that in this country, which was always seen as to be an agriculture country, in decades and decades, I have never seen 2,316 crore rupees been allocated. 8 crore farmers have been benefited. The list of this can be procured by you by filing an RTA. 8 crore farmers. I'll give you one simple example. If you don't have good breed animals, you will never have good milk, quantity of milk, neither you will have meat of the animals, which you have maybe goat or piggery or anything else. 19 IVF-led establishments, they have been done in India. Now, this IVF will help farmers to have a better breed animals, be it be camel, be it be cow, be it be goat, be it be. And 2 Rashtriya Kamdhenu Prajanan Kendras have been established. Nobody thought about having an alternate income to a farmer. This is the first time. Women has been an essential element in the agricultural sector or the rural sector or even in the urban poor. 81 lakh self-help groups have been doing business and they have been given loans under Mudra loan. You can procure the list in case you want to read. These people who are working in an organized sector, ready patriwalas, telawalas, or people like you and me who may be singly working in one-man company, two-man company, that did not have pension, they were worried about their future. Atal Pension Yojana allows a person, a citizen, to register inside it between 18 to 40 years of his age, and he gets benefited when he is of 60 years. See, the number of people is 5 crore. So 3 things. I talked to you about EPFO numbers. Can you deny that? Can you deny the unorganized workers who have been registered?
Okay, so
Let me go ahead. Let me go ahead. See, I have been listening for 35 minutes. Political statement. Let me give you the real figure. Now, let me talk to the corporate part. The production link incentive scheme, which has unlocked the manufacturing in this country. Ma'am, 3 lakh employment has been generated. More than 100 MSMEs are there which have benefited in fiscal year 22 itself. There has been an investment of more than 47,500 crore rupees, man. Now, do you want to say that?
Niluji, we are again giving the budget
yes.
on the.
No. Vineet, let me get in a response. No, you've already mentioned a lot of things. Let me get in a quick response. We have time on hand now. I'm really sorry. Let me go to the other panelists also.
But
yes.
We have already got the soft copy. We will read it about all this.
Okay. Yes, Dr. Ashutosh. Yes, go ahead.
So Niluji,
I have to go to all the panelists. Very little time on hand. Yes.
As Mr. Vineet has explained all the things, but I'm very amazed that he was talking about the roads, and he says that the initial the civilization was around the river. Now the civilization is against the around the roads. But not a single point budget has been increased about the expressway in the Uttar Pradesh. Not a single penny has you increased. This was very surprising. You are giving the clarification. You are giving the clarification of the development. Not a single penny has been given to the smart cities. What about the smart cities, the dream project of Pradhan Mantri ji? And you are talking about the alternate income. I'm sorry, Mr. Vineet. This is just like you are skipping the main medicine and you are giving the alternate medicine. This is how you are seeing the Indian. No, just if this is about the Atmanirbhar, why the unemployment rate is 8.3%, the highest ever till now? Why? And why it is the lowest level of lower labor protection rate in the India? This is actually, you have no vision to create a job. You have no plan to tackle the inflation. You have no plan to stabilize and decrease the inequality. Because 1%, now in India, it is very shocking. And the economic survey has given it is very shocking. And the world should know that 1% richest population of the India own 40% of the wealth, and 50% of the poor India pay 64% of GST. And your finance minister, our finance minister, has not spoken a single word on the GST. This is hazardous. This is a poor vision.
Okay, let me go to Dr. Acharya. Yes, Dr. Acharya, go ahead. You just heard what Vineet is saying.
Very quickly, I wanted to tell you that the esteemed BJP spokesperson talked about a lot of inputs that we benefited so many people. We reached out. I'm interested in outcomes. What has been the outcome? And the outcome has already been talked about in terms of inequality, etc. So let's not quote input figures to show your success. It has to be outcome figures to show the success. The second point I wanted to say is very quickly that certain figures have been going up, like suddenly we are seeing that the total foreign exchange is going up, but at the same time, a lot of foreign exchange is going outside the country also in terms of people leaving. So what is actually happening is that money which is going up in the country is because of the borrowing. And the money which is going out is our own money, so we're getting increasingly indebted. This is a problematic situation. So unless we go inside what is the exact amount, we have a serious problem. And my last point is to quote from Shakespeare, that 7 crowns for thy glory, death for thy ambition. The point is, nobody is saying that you haven't built roads and railways and ports. What one is saying is, there is unemployment, there is poverty, there is inequality. We cannot forget that.
Absolutely. Those are the larger questions. Exactly. I'll come to you, Vineet. I'll give you time. Don't worry. Dr. Muni, you want to respond to what Vineet has just said? He laid out a big plan as to what all the government has done so far, how the pain points have been addressed. You want to say something? A quick response?
Neelu, I'll just take a couple of minutes only. Interesting. Yes. The government, Viniji is a good colleague. The government is through national education policy. Do you remember that national education policy is such a good policy Indian government has brought? And through the national education policy, the government says the national education policy says that the government should spend 6% of the budget on education. Interestingly, the government has brought down the budget from 2.6% to 2.5%. आधा भी नहीं देते और बात करते हैं युवा को डेवलप करने का. दूसरा point, second point, in 2014, the country was in debt of 53 lakh crore. In 2022, it went back to 150 lakh crore. And after this budget, the fiscal deficit and loan on Indian exchequer will be 165 lakh crore. This is all clear facts, no politics. Third point, we have talked about bullet train. We talked about, किसानों की आय दुगनी करेंगे. We talked about 60 lakh job opportunities. Interestingly, they are not on ground. Last point, we need a huge project. Just starting 4 projects will not do it. Interestingly, we have to do much more than what is promised by the Bharatiya Janata Party union budget.
Okay, Siddharth, what do you really have to say on what Vineet explained as to what all the government has planned and on its larger objectives? Yes.
Yeah, Neelu, I don't need to say anything. The viewers would have seen that when Vineet was speaking about the government's goals in this budget, he was speaking about infrastructure. Please remember, infrastructure is government property. So he has only reinforced what I was saying, that this budget was prepared just to keep the Sarkar in mind. Neither the corporates were an entity. Rather than being a magnanimous budget, it was a myopic budget where the budget maker was only concerned about how to make sure that the Sarkar is running in Faida. It was not considering
the budget for making the government richer, you mean to say?
Pardon me?
You mean to say that the budget is for making the government richer at the cost of the poor?
Exactly. And that is why when the BJP spokesperson was speaking, he was speaking a lot about infrastructure projects. But the point is, unless you invest in people, there is an investment in infrastructure and there is an investment in people. With people's savings coming down, unless you put money into the people's pockets through some medium, this budget is not going to work. Yet, I wholeheartedly feel that whatever budget has come, we have to make sure that this budget is a success, because that is where everyone's good lies in.
Okay, so now I'll go to Vineet again, and then after that, I'll come back to all the panelists for rating the budget on a scale of 10. Yes, Vineet.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I was not going to make any political statement because there were a couple of political statements. I remember one Hindi line which was taught to me when I was taking baby steps in politics. Somebody senior said, अगर विरोधकों के मुंह पर चिंता और भड़ास दिखे तो मान लीजिए आपने सही काम किया है. तो मुझे अच्छा लग रहा है आज कि हमने शायद सही काम किया है.
Okay.
See, I spoke about the EPFO number. I spoke about the E-Shram card. I spoke about the people who have participated in the Atal pension. Now, these are the real people, citizens. Unfortunately, my earlier panelists do not consider them as to be real citizens of this country. But anyway, let me give you one more example. Shamefully,
be very brief, Vineet. Yes. Yeah.
I can stop also because the budget.
No, don't stop. You give your answer. I said just be brief.
Yeah. In case you want me to stop and listen to others, I am very happy. As I said, विरोधकों के मुंह पर जब मुझे चिंता दिखती है और भड़ास दिखती है तो बड़ा सुकून मिलता है. So मैं रुक सकता हूँ. मुझे कोई and you would have seen I had my smiles.
Go ahead.
And I don't get disturbed because I remember my points very clearly. Siddharth knows me that whenever there is a debate, I keep my calm and I continue to contribute my points. See, roti kapada makan as per the Maslow's hierarchy of need was the basic physiological need we needed, which has been taught. it has been talked by socialists, it has been talked by the Congress. But did we ever see a 66% increase, which amounts to 79,000 crores has been invested in PM Awas? The number of people who have got Pakka Makan the keys, you deny whatever you want to deny. Those people know that they have got the house. Let me talk to you one more thing.
Allocations have dropped beneath PM Awas allocations have dropped by 12% from 90,000 crore to 79.5 crore.
पहले घर दे दिए तो अभी जरूरतें कम हो गई. So let me tell you.
Okay.
So I let me tell you one more thing. When total 11.7 crore toilets been allocated and been built, I'll tell you, this is beyond the budget which my earlier speakers would have ever understood. The pain of a woman going out in open defecation.
No, I understand
so
what
that is the budget. Let me complete. Let me complete.
Just answer this question as to why these allocations have dropped. PM Awas Yojana, I gave you the drop by 12%. Manrega has dropped from 98.4 thousand crores to 60,000 crores. Food subsidy has dropped from 91,619 crores to 1.97 lakh crores. So what exactly Siddharth was saying that you're not investing in the people?
Unlike so please have a little heart to hear the real reasons. You ask me a question, I'm trying to give you the answer. Allocations of budgets are given on the real estimates and the needs, not because to satisfy people like you to say that every budget allocation has been increased. Where will you bring the money from? So you have to be rational and truthful. The need for Manrega was because there was a need there. Today the need is to give toilets, so we are building toilet and the money goes there. Cylinders which have been given to women at the home.
Really running short of time, Akash. Yeah. Just let Vineet complete his point. Yes, Vineet, go ahead.
Ma'am, 9.6 crore cylinders have been given to women. Will that not help them to save time and the pain of going to the jungle, getting hurt, or maybe been teased, or maybe been there have been unlawful things which have been happening when they go to collect goods. So this also reduces the need. When you have already allocated cylinder, when you have already allocated toilet, the need for PM Awas will change, of course. And one more thing, agricultural credit target which has gone up to 20 lakh crore rupees, will that not help the farmer? Let me also tell you one more thing. 157 new nursing colleges will be established. Now that will help young girls who may not become a medical doctor, but will become a paramedic. Fisheries, which is also one way of doing a farming on the water, 6,000 crore has been allocated. Will not that help? So basically, the power and the benefits of the democracy have reached the last man there. The panelists who have spoken before me,
undoubtedly, Vineet, undoubtedly, the government has been I'm really running short of time. I'm really running short of time, Vineet, now, because there are other lives also lined up. But the government has been high on promising, but low on delivery, low on implementation. Now I'll come back to all the panelists for quick 1 second answer. Dr. Ashutosh, on a scale of 10, how would you rate the budget?
So I will budget it a lot more than 5. It's a only political, visionless budget for us.
Okay, 5 on 10. Dr. Sarthi Acharya, how would you rate
5
the budget?
on 10.
Pardon?
5 on 10.
5 on 10. Dr. Muni?
5 on 10.
5 on 10. Okay, Siddharth?
जब पेशेंट आईसीयू में हो तो उसको आप टॉनिक दे रहे हैं, कम से कम आपने जहर नहीं दिया, टॉनिक दिया, उसको दवाई की जरूरत थी, फिर भी आपने टॉनिक दे दिया, इसलिए 5 नंबर तो मिलना ही मिलना है.
Okay, Vineet, last word to you. Few seconds, 40 seconds to you, Vineet, and I end the show. Yes.
As I said, when my opponents give 5 out of 10, it means that I've got more than 15.
I'm not your opponent. I'm not your opponent. I'm one of your. I've been very lenient.
Okay. I'm really running.
Nobody is an enemy. We are all trying to be.
Scale of 10.
Sir, I've never used the word enemy, sir. You're like, sir, I've been watching you since my childhood. When I was toddler.
Budget has been rated as 5, so which means that it's not a bad budget, but yes, a lot of improvements are needed. But it's a mix of populism and prudence both. But in the days to come, of course, the budget will be dissected. It will be analyzed further. More and more economists are going to speak about it. So we'll have to look for the far bigger headlines in tomorrow's newspaper. And then probably we'll have more discussions on this. Thank you so much, Vineet Goenka, Siddharth Sharma, Dr. Sarthi Acharya, Dr. Akash Deep Muni, Dr. Verma. Thank you. And stay tuned.